Today for VR Download, I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We've got hand tracking and built-in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show us our notes and comments so that we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. Please hit that like button now. In case this is your first time here, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support the work we do directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Justin Corcoran, Richard Meller, Parmesan Cubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, DePonch, and Soul Presence. Sincerely, thank you, all of you, for your support. Before we get into today's show, I wanted to tell you about last night. I was in my Vision Pro in my living room, and I put on some music on my speakers. I pulled up the lyrics on a giant screen over the couch, and I danced in my headset for about half an hour. I told Siri to turn off the lights and turn down the air, and then I collapsed on the couch. I turned a dial on my headset to switch my environment to go to Amalthea. I think that's how it's called. That's a small rock orbiting around Jupiter. I pulled up my system menu and I put myself there in Jupiter's shadow, with the sun much further away from Earth out there on the other side of the solar system's largest planet. I laid my head back on my pillow behind me. I let my eyes just soak in the brilliance of the Milky Way, with a pillow providing plenty of support for the entire back of my head. I looked there at different star clusters, trying to see if my eyes would adjust to the darkness the same way my eyes might adjust over a few minutes in the darkness of the actual night. I don't think they do. But I turn my head to the right. So I'm like this. I turn my head to the right, and I see that over there's the big black circle that is Jupiter. And over to the right, there's a bluish, yellowish crest forming at the right side. And I realize that is dawn breaking over there. With a sudden flash, my little rock is awash in light from a star that's so far out that until now, I haven't been able to tell whether it was a moon or a star. But now I'm sure that it's actually our sun, and that rocky landscape down below me is covered in light. I turn my back to the stars, and I just smiled. That was last night. Now, before I hand you over to David to read today's lineup, I'm going to read you 2 paragraphs from an article published 12 years ago in October 2013. Jeff Norris is a computer scientist leading the Mission Operations Innovation Office at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. It's a lab focused on projects that can change the way humans interact with and control spacecraft. Prior to that, he worked on development of the Curiosity rover and the uplink system used to command it. Quote, "One of the things we're investigating is the use of immersive displays for looking at data returned from spacecraft. We're looking at virtual reality technology as a way for our scientists and engineers to better understand the environment around a spacecraft and then better control that spacecraft. But we're also looking at these technologies as a way to share the journey of these missions with the public. The fact that inexpensive devices like the Rift are becoming more accessible to a broader audience helps both those goals. It's now conceivable to put these kinds of devices into the hands of a whole mission science team. It's also possible for us to imagine in the not too distant future, millions of people in the public having these kinds of devices and being able to consume this data along with us. One NASA demo takes information from the Curiosity rover on Mars and turns it into a panoramic views as if you were sitting on the vehicle looking around. Another lets you move around the International Space Station using an Xbox controller. If we put humans on Mars someday, we should have millions of people there. This is the quote from Jeff Norris. If we put humans on Mars someday, we should have millions of people there with them, standing beside them in this holodeck-like way. In 1969, the television was the most engaging and effective medium for bringing the world along. It was a perfect choice at the time. It's not the perfect choice now. That was 12 years ago I wrote that. 10 years ago, I started writing for UploadVR, and 8 years ago, Dr. Jeff Norris started working for Apple. Yeah. So hello to everyone out there. Please feel free to share where you're watching us from, and hello to our time travelers catching us at different times or speeds. I believe there's a new category of audience member I also need to address as well, and that is people who are watching us through a universal translator into their native language. So hello to you as well, David. David, what do we have today?
Yes, hello everyone. It's good to be here. We are having our last show before Meta Connect, which is next week, and I will be there on site at Meta Connect. So we'll be trying to report as much of the announcements as we possibly can from Connect at the time. Today, though, before we talk about our predictions and expectations for Connect, we are going to talk about 9, in fact, different subjects. So firstly, we will be touching a little bit on the Apple event this week, the iPhone and iPhone accessories event. Why is that? Because the iPhone 17 Pro, as well as the other 17 models, are still limited to 1080p 30 FPS spatial video recording. We had been really hoping to see that improve to maybe 60 FPS, for example, but that is not the case. And so we're quite disappointed by that, and we'll get into that. The next topic we're going to discuss is AlterEgo's silent speech device, which could be the answer to dictating text in public. That's a problem we bring up in this show a lot. The idea of if you're walking around the world with your AR glasses, how do you input text? For a lot of people, you're not going to want to speak out loud your most private messages and thoughts. So there needs to be a solution to that. And this is a very, very interesting solution indeed, a spin-off of the AlterEgo research paper from 2018. It's now becoming a product. We'll get into the details of what I even mean by silent speech. We will then discuss the US Army's SMBC program. So that's the successor to IVAS, and they have now awarded the initial contracts for hundreds of test units to Anduril, Palmer Lucky's defense company, which recently partnered with Meta, as well as Rivet, which is a Palantir-backed startup. So these two companies are kind of going for the next generation of military AR headsets after the failure of Microsoft's efforts with that modified HoloLens a few years ago. We will then have a smart glasses section of the show where we firstly talk about the report from the information that Amazon is working on Echo HUD glasses, as well as HUD glasses for its delivery drivers. So 2 different products there, one for delivery, one for consumers, but some of the fundamental architecture there is quite similar. And then we will discuss the article that I just published today, which is actually the reason for our show delay, which is everyone and anyone is making smart glasses now. That's the article title. At the end of the show, we're going to talk about our Connect predictions, of course. And one of the biggest expectations for Connect is that Meta will launch its own HUD glasses. But ahead of that, I wanted us to get out a story that talked about how Meta is not the first to do this. There are already products you can buy on the market today. There have been for years. And while Meta's product will be unique in its own ways and have its own advancements, that's something we really wanted to note and get out there. And then we'll discuss that soon. We'll then have a Porsche and BMW section, something you probably didn't think VR download would have, but it's in the context of how these different companies are using mixed reality. So the first story is about how Porsche used co-located Apple Vision Pro headsets during the presentation of its new 911 Turbo to showcase the new drivetrain. And we'll talk about how Apple Vision Pro is being used in enterprise. A lot of the focus is on its consumer success, but it is a breakout hit in the enterprise market, and there's a very good reason for that we'll get into. We will then discuss BMW using Quest 3 to train technicians to repair its EV batteries. So this Porsche use case is, for a design studio, a small number of headsets, but BMW's use case is quite different. They want to scale up to have many different technician training sites be using these headsets. We're talking not just a couple of headsets, but dozens, potentially hundreds, and potentially eventually thousands. And so that's where the lower price of Quest 3 becomes a lot more appealing. So we'll talk about how BMW are using it. Then we will finish by talking about Meta. Firstly, we will talk about the Washington Post's report that Meta buried research on child safety in Horizon Worlds, and Ian dug into that, and he'll be able to tell you more about that. We will discuss Horizon Worlds desktop editor getting the ability to add scriptable conversational AI NPCs, something that Meta teased at Connect 2024. So it's shipping it right before Connect 2025, literally a week to go. That is classic software, isn't it? And finally, we will talk about, of course, as the title of the show suggests, our expectations and predictions for Meta Connect 2025 next week.
Yeah, so a lot of really great comments out there, like Will Valentine's comment. I can't justify spending near $1,000 on a Valve headset. No friends to experience it, and I sound like a weirdo. We'll have to see them announce something there, put together what they're pitching. But I love the idea of Among Us, both in like a Steam frame headset and then played by a friend sitting right next to you, playing Among Us 3D on a Steam Deck. That's a beautiful model for VR that could be accessible for that sort of scenario that Will is talking about. And then there was the comment saying they wanted us to skip the iPhone story right at the top of the store of the lineup. No, however, I'm going to lead with the question that I think explains the reason why we covered it or why we're looking at it. My question is, can an Apple Vision Pro 2 be a better camera than an iPhone?
So my argument here has always been that for most regular people, the best camera you have is the one that's in your pocket all day long. And I'm using the word best there not to mean the best specs, right? It's obviously not the best camera. You could have a great DSLR or mirrorless at home. But if you're trying to capture memories, and we keep using that word because this is how people use their phone cameras, it's why phones are so popular as cameras that happen in life spontaneously. And yes, smart glasses will, of course, be a huge element of that, being able to even more spontaneously capture things. You don't even need to take something out of your pocket. But right now, the ability to pull an iPhone or a Pixel phone or Samsung or whatever you own out of your pocket. A lot of these phones have a gesture. For Pixel, you double tap the power button and the camera's open. For iPhone, there's similar gestures. And take a photo or video in that moment. That's significant. That matters. That's when you capture the moments that matter to you, whether it be on a holiday, a hike, a wedding, a family birthday, whatever it is, having that phone there in your pocket matters. So it is hugely important and was hugely important for Apple to ship the ability to record spatial video from iPhones. Spatial video is just, in case you're wondering, Apple's term for 3D stereoscopic video recorded with the Apple HEVC profile. So it's not volumetric, it's not anything special, it's just using these two cameras, which are not actually the same lens. They are doing some clever software work here to make it seem like the same lenses, but using these two cameras to record in 3D. And yes, as a lot of commenters like to point out, the interaxial distance between these cameras is not huge. It is, 4 or 5 times less than your real eye width. So you're not getting perfect, great stereo 3D, but it's a lot better than nothing. And it's the camera you have in your pocket. So the story this week and why this matters is that Apple introduced this 2 years ago with the iPhone 15 Pro. So it was not available in the base 15, but it was in the 15 Pro, limited to 1080p 30 FPS. Fine, it's a first generation. Then last year, the year after the 15 Pro, they brought it to the base model iPhone 16. So every iPhone 16 except for the 16e, because it only has one lens, but it was introduced later. Every mainline iPhone 16, the 16, the 16 Plus, the 16 Pro, and the 16 Pro Max can capture spatial video too. Same 1080p 30 FPS, but okay, we were more interested in the fact that it now became available to the base 16. So we now, because of that, live in a world where hundreds of millions of people have a 3D camera in their pocket. It's not perfect. Absolutely. Sure, they could go and get a better 3D camera for $200 with the X-Real Beam Pro. But again, it's the one they have in their pocket all day long. So this year, what should have been next? They had already brought it to the base model. What we had hoped and expected for was for that 1080p 30 FPS cap to go away, increase to 60 FPS, maybe a 4K 30 mode, but that's not the case. The iPhone 17 Pro and all of the 17 models are still limited to 1080p 30 FPS for spatial video, and the iPhone Air has one lens like the 16e, so cannot capture spatial video at all. So this is disappointing. We really wonder what the reason behind this is. In the time between the 15 Pro and the 17 Pro, we've seen a massive increase in compute. Right, it's gone from the A17 Pro chip to the A19 Pro. They can now do 4K 120 FPS capture. They can record the front and back camera simultaneously. Clearly, there has been major improvements to the ISP, the image signal processor chip here, but there must be another bottleneck of some sort. Some people have speculated camera bandwidth, thermals, could be some other, really odd quirk of technicality that only Apple engineers know. So we reached out to Apple and they confirmed that this is the case, right? It's not a misprint. It is 1080p 30 FPS still. And they did not obviously disclose the reasons. Apple as a company, I almost never reveals specific technical details like this. But yeah, this was a major disappointment in this event, to not see the spatial video capabilities improve.
Yeah, so I'm seeing the conversation here saying, okay, they got it on iPhones, let's move on. All right, Derek, give us a minute here and understand why we're talking about this. And I saw everyone talk about photography, and I've got this half-written editorial that's trying to break this down. I'm going to read you a bit from it. Apps like Whist show a path to volumetric memory capture that's very different from traditional photo and video that we know from the 19th and 20th centuries. The highest budget movies that we have today, flickering lights at us from a wall, are just sped up photographs dropping us into a flat framed illusion. That is not what we are discussing. And you have to move past the idea of framing your scene a little bit and understand what are the limits of the capture, the underlying sensor capture, the system that is taking these data streams. How is it processing it and all of that? All that is to say, I've done this multiple times. I've had audience members to this show see through my eyes inside of an Apple Vision Pro headset while on a call with them. It's a different thing to be John Malkovich, right? It's being John Malkovich going inside the head. What this does is, if you imagine that the headset is actually capturing, is like the cheap capture device. If you're imagining that the Apple Vision Pro 2 or whatever headset you've got, a Samsung headset with great cameras on it, is your main capture device. Then you take your Samsung phone, your Android phone, your iPhone, whatever, you take it over here, off to the side a little bit, and you have all of your subjects look at you, the person in the headset. They focus on you. You're the camera person. But this camera, offset a little bit, captures the behind the scenes occluded angles that aren't visible directly head on from the headset. I don't know if this will work, but it changes. Apple just did this event yesterday where they announced Genlock features and the idea that you could get a whole series of iPhones. You could actually buy 10 iPhones and set them up on a rig to do the Matrix capture that they did back in the day. You could do that with iPhones today. There are
with the 17 Pro, just to note, that's exclusive to the 17 Pro.
And if you go watch the movie 28 years later, you'll see what's a scene where they tried to do something very similar with current iPhone technology. And it's a little jerky, but it's not quite bullet time. It has a very specific look to it, but it's the same path. This is a very long-winded way of explaining that when you do volumetric recreations, you're not framing media in exactly the same way as filmmakers did. If you want your child's first steps, your child's goal in soccer, you can do really amazing things with a 5x zoom and a steady hand, sort of framing your scene just right as you follow the action on the soccer field. Or, if you take yourself out of the moment of your child taking their first steps and focus on the framing and the camera, you can get a really beautifully cinematically, shot angle of your child's first steps. But no, actually, there's plenty of parents out there that for plenty of occasions, setting up 2 cameras in 2 places is actually worth the effort. And then you get a memory capture that is fully volumetrically framed. You get all those details that are currently being left out of all the current systems. Now, I'm talking about like consumer use. There is a space in between here where, like, if you get good enough data from all of your subjects, do you get good enough data to go then paint over all that with CGI after and fix all of the things in your data stream after, and actually you get a CGI pipeline that works with all of this. I was listening to the Batman the other night, the Batman commentary, and the director of Batman, I think it was the director on this commentary, said or maybe it was the writer, sorry. The writer storyboarded out the entire story of the Batman using a VR headset to frame every single shot by loading up the environments and then walking around them virtually. It's the same darn thing that I'm talking about, just at the other end of the special effects spectrum. All right, David, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I just think there's obviously this deep irony that we kind of have a lot of the time where we're talking about current capture technologies that, I'm bringing up like the limits of today and you're talking about the where we are tomorrow. And I think it's great that we're both bringing those perspectives, but I just kind of want to bring it down to earth and say that, you're talking about multi-camera volumetric setups, and Apple meanwhile hasn't even pushed past 1080p 30 FPS for regular, 3D video. So it's interesting that there are startups, like you point out, Wist, that are pushing forward and delivering this today in a single cam setup. And there are, of course, open source models that will let you do a multicam setup, but we haven't really seen anyone ship a consumer video volumetric capture system yet. And Wist, that we discussed last week, probably is the closest thing. I guess one last thing I want to just say is, you said the conversation was that people are saying to move on. I just want to be clear for the listeners. It was one commenter, like we don't need to, while I respect that one commenter's view, I don't think we need to think too much about that.
All right, so back to this specific issue. All right, so 60 FPS. What do we get out of 60 FPS? Right, we've got an example video that I've put on our website of me shooting tennis using the Apple Vision Pro and an iPhone, shooting at this limit of 30 frames per second. That tennis ball is flying back and forth across the court at very high speeds. You add more frame rate, suddenly that ball doesn't look like it's stuttering across the scene. It looks like it's smooth motion. That's why we need these higher frame rates. And we're
camera motion. Hold on. I mean, yes, that's completely valid for object motion, but also if you're filming a scene where you're moving rather than keeping the camera still. Right now, this just looks really juddery, especially on Vision Pro. If you bring up the kind of spatial video view that brings it to sort of full screen per se, where it has the edges fade out into reality and brings this very, very large view, it just doesn't look very good at 30 FPS. And also, of course, we want to get beyond 1080p. Ideally, if we could wave a magic wand, we want 4K as well. You want to get more detail. This is just disappointing to see. And if anyone's wondering, for reference, by the way, the Apple Vision Pro headset itself records at 2200 by 2200 30 FPS. So it's a square aspect ratio, but we're talking roughly the same kind of resolution there.
So higher resolution, higher frame rates will equate to better spatial video that you want to look at for longer, that you want to capture more often. The thing that we are suggesting, or the thing that you maybe theorized, a couple others out there were theorizing, is you can't get enough heat dissipation off of all these components that are happening inside of a phone. However, now, what if you've got a headset that has a mode that switches into just to take over the headset as a camera, and you've got more surface area on the front of the headset to dissipate this heat? Could you get 60 frames per second at 4K directly out of the headset?
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, these mixed reality headsets are already designed to do this, right? To bring in a lot of bandwidth from cameras in real time. That's how the pass-through works. You're already getting, a decently high resolution view at, depending on the headset, 30, 60, or 90 FPS. So I would be shocked if the next Vision Pro that we expect Apple to launch sometime this year with the M5 or M4 chip, whatever that ends up being, doesn't do this. It's just surprising to see the iPhones not have it. And I don't want to harp on too much about it because there's too many ways I could just say, oh, I'm disappointed by this over again. But this is the first time since the announcement of Apple Vision Pro back in mid 2013 that my assessment of Apple's commitment to XR has somewhat faltered. And I do want to put that in context that, we're about to get Vision OS 26 launching. The release candidate is out, and Ian talked about how Jupyter is in it. And Vision OS 26 is the best XR operating system I have ever used by far. And there are so many massive improvements in it that it shows that Apple clearly is very committed to XR. So I want to be clear, this is not a sweeping statement. I'm just saying in this one specific area, I think they've dropped the ball here. I think this is just not what I expected. I really expected to see that number go to 60.
So I have a video or a couple of videos that I recorded at Walkabout Mini Golf headquarters out when I was visiting them in Texas. I wore the Apple Vision Pro. I had the subject sit across across a table from me on the other side, and I interviewed them. Then I went back and watched these on headset. I want higher resolution. I would love higher frame rate. And then there was another thing I needed to have done was I needed to have taken my phone and put it near them to capture a closer microphone of their audio in the room, clean from the rest of the audio. I'm describing ultimately the same thing I just described in the last segment was an intelligent system, a software-based system to manage multiple cameras, multiple microphones, to make sense of all the data between them. And we have WIST in our go back previous weeks on us reporting about this that shows us what can happen when you do that, even from one camera angle. If you start adding additional camera angles and really throwing a server farm the size of Meta's or Microsoft's or Apple's at it, then you arrive at Color was the old startup that I remember made waves back in the day, raised a huge amount of money for nothing. I think the name of the startup. It just the app came and went and nobody used it, right? But it had this vision of like you taking everyone at a party capturing media and it reconstructing exactly what you want to see out of that. It was a stupid idea. It failed. But here we are all these years later where like if you did it right, 7 friends all capturing media of the same event produces a really filled in map of everything that happened at the event. And we're just arguing what's the most monetizable way of getting that capability to users.
Yeah, I'm very impressed by WIST as we discussed last week, but that is the huge question there that when we're talking about something like spatial video, that's all being done on your phone. When it comes to WIST, they are doing some very GPU intensive server side processing that either they eat the cost, which is not sustainable long term, or you pay for as the consumer. So that is the challenge here. Eventually, we want to get volumetric capture like this that works completely on device, but we're a little bit away from that. Let's just address, we're talking about Vision Pro 2, and I see some questions in the comments here. Firstly, I see someone saying, I heard Apple Vision Pro won't be available to 2027, Apple Vision Pro 2. That's from Earl Grey. So there's actually 2 different headsets that Apple is rumored to be currently actively working on. One is a near-term refresh of Vision Pro, so just today's Vision Pro, but with a chip upgrade to either the M4 or M5 chip. That's supposed to be coming anytime soon, possibly next month, if I had to completely guess, but I don't know. Then in the longer term, for 2027, a different headset is rumored that some people call Apple Vision Air, and it would actually be a different product line. So alongside Vision Pro, you would have a Vision Air that would use an A series chip, like from the iPhones, and then have a lighter design, cheaper materials, trying to achieve the kind of goal of half the price and half the weight, roughly. Not exactly, but roughly. So that's the kind of schedule we expect here. A near-term chip bump, and then a new Air maybe line in 2027, according to the rumors. The other thing I want to bring up is the comment from James O'Loughlin, who said, Apple is careful on keeping their focus on messaging. This event was squarely on 3 things: Apple Watch, iPhone, and AirPods. No distractions. Let's wait until the next event for any Vision news. So in one regard, I really strongly agree with you. I saw some people after this Apple event saying, no Vision Pro 2, is it cancelled? And, no, this is a September event that was all about iPhone and iPhone accessories. So I totally agree with you there in that regard. We didn't expect a Vision Pro at this event. We never said in any capacity to expect a Vision Pro at this Apple event this week. And so I don't know where people got that idea from. So where I think I disagree with you, though, is I think you're also kind of suggesting, based on your other comments, that this is why we didn't see any upgrade to spatial video. But spatial video was introduced at the iPhone event for 15 Pro, and it was introduced for iPhone 16, the base model, at the iPhone event. So it would make sense, right? They're talking about the camera, they're talking about the new upgrades. Is it theoretically possible that next month during a Vision Pro event, or whenever it happens, Apple also says, and guess what? We're upgrading the 17 Pro to 60 FPS spatial video. Sure. It just would seem strange to put the product out now and not say that. I don't really get the advantage of waiting for a Vision Pro 2 for that, but maybe that would be great.
It's there's so many thoughts to get into here on just what is a photographer. Like you get a person staring at a camera, and then you got to make them laugh, or you get a moment. Like you go to a studio photography place, and you bring a baby, and you have to figure out how to make the baby laugh on command in the studio photography in order to take $100 from these parents for why they brought you to their studio. And the headset making eye contact with the user requires a different type of photographer to like make the person laugh and make eye contact. Everything all the way down is completely different. And I just want to go back to David's thing of just questioning if an Apple Vision Pro 2 shot 60 frames or higher spatial video, you would be back with their commitment. Like you would think they're just as committed as ever.
Well, I mean, I want to be clear. I'm really made clear about that context. I'm saying in this one specific area, this is the first time it's faltered at all. I want to point that out. But yeah, I think it still wouldn't, because I'm coming back to my point from the start of the show that the best camera is the camera in your pocket. It doesn't matter how good the Vision Pro is. You're not going to be wearing it when your kid rides their bike for the first time in the park. You can shake your head all you want, but it's completely true what I'm saying. It matters to have the camera. Having to take a Vision Pro out of your backpack and put it on and wait for it to boot up and press the recording button, completely different to pulling out your iPhone and pressing record. That's why it matters. It matters because the vast spatial video that will ever be captured will be on iPhone.
It's funny what you're describing. I mean, like you think about the data captured off of one of these LiDAR cars, one of these a Waymo car, or the Teslas, and you see the map that's being done on front of it. But David, I have a bunch of videos on the Ray-Ban glasses of capturing all sorts of events. And yes, we go straight to talking about see-through versus opaque.
Yeah, so glasses, I agree with you, but not a headset.
But so imagine two phones with LiDAR extra data sensing being fed along with the capture data, mounted on the front of a bicycle, capturing two angles of the scene entirely in front of it. You could do a volumetric recreation of the entire path of the bicycle across that, and everyone that it captures along their journey across that entire path with those two camera angles. That's what I'm bringing us back to, on just what are the use cases for the different formats we're talking about. And 1080p spatial video at 30 frames per second is not quite good enough for a lot of things.
Well, I think we very much so agree on that last part. Yeah. So yeah, let's move on to our next topic. AlterEgo's silent speech. So one of the big problems with the idea of having HUD glasses or AR glasses out in the real world, as well as a VR headset, a mixed reality headset, if you're using it in a cafe, at a park, on a train, on a plane, is text entry. So in that headset case, you might often have your laptop and extend its monitor, in which case you have your keyboard. Great. Or you might have a Bluetooth keyboard. But what if you're using it in a more ad hoc way, and more relevantly to this story, what if you're out in the world with your AR glasses, walking down the street, or your HUD glasses in the near term? How do you respond to a text, right? With these HUD glasses we expect to launch very soon from Meta and the other companies that we're going to talk about later, you'll see that text message. You'll be able to open it up in full, even if it's a long multi-paragraph message. You can scroll through it with your wristband gestures, right? This is what we expect to happen next week. But what about replying to it? One option is that you have kind of a keyboard that you scroll through with your wristband. You could have hand tracking with future devices using cameras that are very power hungry, but you could type on an in-air keyboard. We all know how clunky that is from using it on our current headsets. Other solutions include like exotic pocket keyboards. And the most obvious solution that people mostly propose is dictation. You can easily just dictate. Speech to text models these days are excellent. Some of the state of the art is better than you think if you're a skeptic of these. But I'm not questioning their accuracy. They're incredible these days, the state of the art, truly. I've tried them even with my accent, even speaking quickly. I am shocked by how good these things have gotten. The problem is more fundamental than that. It's that if you're in public, are you really going to type an intimate message to your spouse? Are you really going to, respond to your doctor in your app that you're communicating with a doctor or therapist with? No, of course you're not in public. And so, or are you going to ask an AI assistant something really, really personal about a health issue you might have while you're sitting next to someone on the bus? Of course you're not. So this is why AlterEgo is a really, really fascinating potential solution. So this is actually not a new idea, and it was originally called AlterEgo with a capital E as a research paper at MIT back in 2018. And so the same lead author of that paper, who you can see here in the image, is now spinning it off into a company, which he is the CEO and one of the co-founders of, to try and make this a real product. It's obviously a lot more relevant now in the age of actually good AI assistants compared to last decade. And that's kind of one of the key marketing ideas, is how do you communicate with an AI really, really quickly, but without people around you knowing what you're actually saying, completely privately. So for some reason, while their research paper in 2018 was really, really clear, the current marketing of the product is very vague, right? They're trying to do buzzwords and, get hype, and they're talking about it as a near telepathic wearable that lets you type at the speed of thought. And so this has actually led a lot of people, like experts and laymen, to say, this is a scam. This must just be some kind of AI hype nonsense. But the reality is that their marketing side, the technology here is very real. It's very real. And it's actually something that all of our regular listeners and viewers and readers will be quite familiar with, because this is surface electromyography, SEMG, just like Meta's upcoming wristband, except instead of putting it on your wrist and sensing the finger muscle activations to do finger tracking, it puts it on the side of your face, and it detects the movement of your speech muscles, the speech articulator muscles in your face, jaw, and neck. So this allows it to sense something called subvocalization, the subtle internal speech you might make when reading or mouthing out words. So to be clear, if you did speak out loud, this can, from your speech muscle movements, turn that into text. It can do it, but you don't need to speak out loud. You could whisper, or you could even just mouth the words with very subtle mouth movements. And this is why their kind of tagline here is, from the outside, it looks like telepathy. From the outside, someone would see you making very subtle movements with your mouth and jaw, but not something that they could lip read, not something that a lip reader could interpret unless you intentionally make it that obvious. But you can subtly just mouth out the words that you want to input, and this system will be able to turn that into text. So back in 2018, 7 years ago, when this was a research paper at MIT by the same guy, it had 92% accuracy with around half a second of latency. But they obviously suggest that it has been improved since then, and that this has always been kind of using neural networks. And so over time, as the neural networks improve here, just like with Meta's SEMG wristband, this SEMG headband is able to pick up more and more. So this is a really fascinating technology. I remember being amazed by it back in 2018 and hoping it would be a product, because my grandfather actually had lost speech, but he could still speak very, very softly. And so I really wanted this to be a product for him to be able to speak. That is obviously, as well as the consumer tech use cases, one of the things they want to do here is restore speech to people who have lost the ability to use their speech muscles. So this is an interesting product. They haven't said anything like release year, pricing, availability, what this cable coming off his head is actually for. None of that. But I think over time, you could imagine this being a very important potential solution to the public text entry problem.
Yeah, so a couple interesting comments out there, I guess, what I want to sort of dance around or talk about. But like Steve saying, the product isn't fake. It's just marketing it as telepathy that rubs the wrong way. Mark Zuckerberg encountered this and did a whole tour through various podcasts a couple of years ago with the wristband technology, as he tried to describe it not as telepathy, not as mind reading, I think was the issue. It's actually not mind reading. It's just, and he tried to term it this way. But ultimately, you get to some of the underlying discomfort people have here with how much can be understood about you from these inputs. I guess, do we have any wristband stuff coming up this week, or is this as close as we're going to get to wristbands this week?
I mean, we're going to talk about Meta Connect predictions at the end, so we're going to get into Metas, but yeah.
Yeah, so 3 years ago, it was now that they were showing me their wristband tech over at Meta, and Andrew Bosworth, the CTO, told me that the head of the wristband project could replace his keyboard with the wristband technology. So he had trained himself enough to interface with a very similar interface as this to be able to type with his hands or type or write faster with his hands than he can do any other way. The issue is with training time and with how comfortable people feel in giving someone access to this kind of data. And it's really we're not like if you read some of these research studies, it's absolute magic when you have a person who is ultimately locked in almost entirely, and then you use a brain interface that is similar to these to give a person the training they need to talk again after not being able to talk or communicate for potentially years. And you have to balance your discomfort for these brain reading types of interfaces with reality that so many people are going to be helped almost overnight with this technology.
Yeah, I mean, the point you made at the start about Mark Zuckerberg running into this same problem of marketing versus technology is very important. And so that's what I'm trying to make clear here. Neither Meta's wristband nor this are BCI. They are not reading your thoughts. They are reading your muscle activations. So you have to send a signal to your muscle for something to happen here. They are not accessing your brain's neurons in any way. They're not invasive BCI. And so I see a comment here from Nicholas kind of asking about what do we mean about the discrepancy in marketing. They did have AI with Siri back in 2018. We're not saying the AI is the misleading part. It's that they're describing it as if it's a BCI. They're talking about thought. There's no thought involved here. Thought is what happens in your brain. You send a movement signal to your motor neurons to move muscles.
The head of the project at Meta called it co-adaptation, and he actually taught that term, as I recall the interaction, he taught that term to Michael Abrash. And I think co-adaptation, if that's the term, is something we need to understand really, really deeply. Can you unlearn your adaptation once you learn these systems? Or how hard is it to learn something new once you've learned it using these systems that kind of like really try to figure out your intent? Because David, they're not reading your thoughts, but they're reading the immediate outputs of your thought, right? You're saying, I want to point my finger this way. And it's reading that, it's translating that thought at your wrist or wherever this one is, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of it
pretty close.
Some of it comes down to semantics, but I mean, you could, again, this is going to be a silly semantic argument, but you could argue that optical hand tracking is reading your thoughts. Your thought is telling your hand to move and it gets read, but it is the muscle movement, to be clear, this is reading. It's surface electromyography, it's muscle activation. So I just want to be clear about that, because there is this concern that these are BCI, and then there's some marketing that suggests that this could be telepathic. But at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't really matter. To you as the user, it works as it works. How it works isn't crazily important. With this technology, you can so subtly move your mouth that you're barely even actually moving anything, and yet be able to input entire sentences. I'm very interested to try this. The one comment I want to bring up here is from Onakazi, pointing out that they're being very careful with the camera angles here, and that this thing does go along your jaw on the other side. So the practicality and social acceptability aspect here is going to be a challenge. I guess you could argue that people wore Bluetooth headsets before we had like AirPods and things like that kind of did cover the kind of jaw area somewhat. So this could be something that comes out of your ear and kind of connects onto your jaw in the long term. This is obviously still a very early prototype, I should say. I think it's going to be interesting to see where this goes for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of rabbit holes to go down here. James is out there talking about Stanford and their research into how much you can learn. For example, you've got a headset that tracks your eye movement, and you put two pieces of text up on two different walls. You put something in English over here and something in Spanish over here, and you notice which bit of text the person's eye points out longer. Suddenly you've got a good indicator of what language they speak, maybe even what country they're from. And that's just the beginning of what you can learn back about people from observing their activity. Then you've got this other person, who was it, saying a mouse is, basically translating my input into what a computer reads. And there's a lot you can learn from intent. And I think what I'm pointing out here is that there are people today who buy mouse jigglers, in order to trick that input for their employers and perform fraud, right? There could be equivalent sorts of things for fake arms and fake hands if you don't have a good structure for safety and security in place that makes the people trust that their thoughts are their own and not leaving these devices.
Yeah, some really interesting kind of rabbit holes into the meaning of input and the kinds of input that we're going to have. I think something that should come across very clear for our regular viewers is that there's not going to be one ultimate input solution for AR and VR in the long term. This is going to be very much so a multimodal input field where you will switch between different inputs depending on the task you're doing, right? Whether that be hand tracking, a VR controller, eye tracking, keyboards, regular gamepads, neural input technologies, SEMG wristbands and jaw bands, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of this, and sometimes you're going to use A plus C plus F at the same time. There's going to be different combinations here, and the ultimate operating systems and system software here are going to be the ones that integrate all of the input dynamically in the right time. And that sounds buzzwordy, but it does have meaning. It is about how do you translate user intent, what the user wants to do, into action based on all of the possible inputs that the headset currently has access to, or the glasses. And yeah, a lot of that's going to have to be a little bit fuzzy, and some of it's going to involve using neural networks to fuse all of these inputs at the same time. And Apple Vision Pro is a good example of that already, right? Of how eye tracking and hand tracking gets combined, but it's going to go a lot further than that.
Let me give an example. I think I lost a few of our readers on something here. There was a demo I tried, I think it was from Valve, with Tobii eye tracking integrated into one of their headsets at some point. And it was a demo that Tobii has had standard for years, where it's a demonstration of their eye track. You go to a scene and there's a whole bunch of objects on posts out over the scene. And you take an object, I can't remember what it was, and you throw it at each of these things over there in the distance. And with eye tracking, you can do the whole hand motion, throw the ball, and have it hit every single one of the objects on the posts. And for a decade of VR development, not a single developer has assumed or had that intent to build on when building throwing mechanics into their VR games. Well, now you can have VR games that have much better throwing mechanics because you're attaching what the person is looking at with where their arm is. You have much better sensors and all of that. It doesn't, like, the developer goes and builds their own code on top of what the system offers them to try to make that experience work for you, the end user. And the reason I'm talking about this, I tried that from Tobii way back in the day with the Valve, and I think there's an article somewhere on UploadVR.com. It feels like you've got superpowers. You feel like you've suddenly got the ability. You can reverse that, and you've got the gravity gloves. But even better than the gravity gloves, right? A single book on the shelf over there can be pulled over to you instead of just that one object in your field of view that's attachment. And like what I'm saying is, back then it felt like eye tracking and hand tracking were the magic combo to make us do a whole lot of things. Now we're talking about 5 years into the future when you've got even better tracking at the wrist, or maybe even better tracking on the head. It's going to feel even more like superpowers than we even are. Like, I'm talking about eye tracking that most people still haven't experienced. It was basically lab research in 2017. Now it's on a $3,500 headset in 2025. We need it on consumer hardware in the next few years and all that stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of potential for fusing eye tracking with hand tracking, not just for the gaze and pinch that we always talk about, Apple Vision Pro's input system, but also, as you pointed out there, that's a great example in a VR game. How often have you been frustrated by throwing, and maybe because the way you hold the controller is not the way you would hold that object exactly, or maybe there's a little bit of tracking hitch and you try to throw a grenade and you miss what you were trying to hit. Well, that's a great example of using eye tracking to figure out what were you trying to hit. And that doesn't mean doing like a cartoonish auto aim that no matter where you throw, it just goes exactly where your eye was looking. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fusing it in to guide that. And it's all about how do you integrate these different inputs and get something closer to intent while also matching that to gameplay difficulty. It's a very, very hard challenge, and you get into some really quite complex algorithms. So are we ready to move on to the next topic, or is there something else you want to bring up there?
Side effects, right? We had that research sent to us about side effects, right? When we start talking about the next steps of what you just described, right? How closely what you're doing, whether you can practice with what you're doing for the real world, or whether what you're learning in the headset actually makes it harder for you to unlearn some things when you go back to apply it to the real world, is an
Yeah.
active question we'll have to explore as well. But yes, let's move on.
Yeah. I think, am I right in saying you plan to cover that, and we can talk about that on the show once you,
Yeah,
we'll cover
sometime
that for
soon,
sure.
hopefully. Might have to be after Connect a couple weeks, probably.
Sure. I don't think that's too time pressured. Let's talk about our next topic, and this is one that is obviously something very serious and something that is going to have significant effects in the world. So we're going to try and be very careful about how we cover this, and that is that the U.S. Army is now testing, or has paid Anduril and Rivet the money to deliver the headsets for testing on the scale of hundreds of units for these kind of AR headsets that they want to eventually one day equip all frontline soldiers with. And so this is not a new concept here, right? We had the IVAS program, which Microsoft was the lead contractor for, with their HoloLens system. It was kind of a modified HoloLens 2 that over time became so Ship of Theseus modified that it wasn't a HoloLens 2 at all anymore. It was kind of a HoloLens 3. People wonder what happened to HoloLens 3. Well, it was there in HoloLens IVAS by the end. But Microsoft's solution was plagued with issues. There were multiple US congressional reports that pointed out just how bad it was, how soldiers were, getting headaches, eye strain, nausea. And so Congress at one point literally blocked the army from buying new units from Microsoft because they just weren't good enough. It just was not good enough. And so then what happened, obviously, and we've been covering this story as it progresses, is that Palmer Luckey's Anduril, his defense company that he started after being fired from Oculus, slowly took over more and more of IVAS. Firstly, it was just doing the software, so Microsoft was still doing the hardware. And then around 9 months ago or so, they announced that they're taking over the hardware too, with a system that they call Eagle Eye. And so the IVAS program has now kind of evolved into SBMC, Soldier Borne Mission Command. It's a new version of the contract. It's not kind of bogged down by the legacy requirements. They've learned a lot from IVAS, and they now have given two contractors, Anduril and Rivet, each 159 million and 195 million, respectively, to deliver hundreds of production representative headsets for field testing. So this comes a few months after, back in May, Meta and Anduril announced a partnership. So Anduril is partnering with Meta, as we discussed, Palmer Luckey's Anduril and Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, a partnership that we would never have predicted a few years ago. But the kind of changes in political and cultural climate have gotten us to the point where this is now the reality. And so we're essentially seeing the Anduril Meta team go up against this new startup called Rivet. And who are Rivet, you may wonder? So they are a kind of startup that has recently emerged out of what's called stealth mode, where a startup doesn't say anything about what they're doing and they just build in silence and then release. And they have this product called Hard Spec. And you can see it in the right image here, and I can kind of bring up more images of Hard Spec. They are kind of ruggedized AR glasses that are specifically designed for the military use case. They obviously are tethered, as you can see here, to external compute and battery. And so the main approach difference I see between Anduril's Eagle Eye and Rivet's Hardspec is that Anduril describe Eagle Eye as a integrated ballistic shell. So Anduril's product is not just a headset, but it's a helmet. They are actually trying to pitch a product to the military that they would buy instead of the helmet that they put on soldiers. So this would literally be a thing that instead of having to wire, through your helmet and attach to, external kind of hardware like you see here and kind of have clip-ons that deliver this capability, it's literally just a helmet you put on your head and wire to a battery pack, and that's it. And so that's a very interesting approach from Anduril. So they're actually trying to provide all of the protection that you would get from a regular military helmet, but also add this augmented reality capability. Whereas Rivet's Hardspec currently, as it has been announced, it's hard to get a lot of details about this stuff, but from what we've seen announced so far, this is an AR glasses product that is added on to the helmet that they would already be using. So it'll be very interesting to see how these evaluations go, these hundreds of units that they're getting from each company and testing in the field. As I mentioned, Microsoft's were, to be frank, a catastrophe in a lot of these tests. Meta and Anduril's team seem quite confident. Palmer Luckey has been talking in interviews about how he's the world's best headset designer and he knows how to do this right. And even though Microsoft did it wrong, he's going to do it right and he's going to prove it. And so we'll have to see if he's going to really prove it or not. And it's going to be interesting to see how Rivet does. In terms of Rivet's background, they are backed by Palantir, the kind of US company that provides kind of data and intelligence services to intelligence agencies and also the military. But this isn't a Palantir versus Anduril situation because Palantir is actually also a strategic partner of Anduril. So Palantir is partially funding Rivet and partnering, and while also partnering with Anduril. So it's an interesting dynamic as to whether that's really competition or the same company kind of benefiting, regardless who wins.
I'm going to take us straight to, let's talk about Batman Arkham Shadow, where they talked about rescue vision. In Batman Arkham Shadow, there's a headset that's depicted near the end of the game, and it's depicted as rescue vision with the story on a newspaper you find indicating that they're just going to sell it to basically search and rescue teams. And the idea being, what if you could outline in one color only people around you? What if you could only afford to highlight everyone around you in the color red, the color green, or the color white? And you have enough great sensing data to have like a millimeter accurate map of everything around you, and you just outline certain groups of people that way. What is the most obvious use for those places? Who needs those headsets the most? And what color are you going to outline people in is a very real question, I think, to ask.
Yeah, so that kind of gets into what are the use cases of these things, especially for viewers that aren't kind of following along. The idea is to greatly enhance these soldiers' situational awareness with the kind of thing that Ian just brought up, where just like in a video game, and I'm not trivializing it, I'm using this as an analogy, you would see blue markers perhaps on your friendly units and red markers on enemies. And we'll get into in our smart glasses discussion how the kind of monochrome era is over, especially for the kind of price era that these headsets are going for. These are both full color devices. So then you might mark people who are suspicious, but you're not sure whether they are friendly or enemy and may have a weapon with yellow. And so this kind of situational awareness really matters, because if you look into some of the wars of the recent decades, including the Gulf War and the first Iraq War, situational awareness can be one of the biggest struggles, not just for navigation, but also for who's a friendly. And you get some really deeply unfortunate friendly fire incidents out of this. But the world that these companies want to create is one where when a pilot in a fighter jet is doing a close air support run, they are literally seeing blue dots showing where the friendlies are and red dots showing where the enemies are, as well as a big giant, yellow objective marker where the friendlies have designated by just pointing and clicking where they want the airstrike to go. And at the same time, the friendlies are looking up into the sky and seeing a blue dot coming from hundreds of kilometers away at first, showing them exactly where that air support is and all of the other assets around them. And so the reason that this is kind of important, or the reason that this is possible, is through Anduril's core product called Lattice. Lattice is the product that they have at the core of all of their other products, and it's a software system and AI system that integrates the data from every sensor on the battlefield, as well as, in this case, once they start to ship these products, they describe the cameras and sensors on board these headsets, and builds a unified strategy game-like view of the entire battlefield that, from a first-person perspective, each soldier gets access to, and then over time as well, the commanders get access to. Currently today on flat screens, but potentially in future, they could have a virtual reality view where they are looking at a three-dimensional view of the battlefield. So it really is all about situational awareness, and that's the challenge here. They also want to do better night vision, and as Ian points out, picking up what is salient, what do you need to know, while also being careful to not overwhelm someone, because the last thing you want when you're in combat is to have your entire view covered with digital markers that are actually just getting in the way of doing what you need to do 100 meters in front of you. It's a deep challenge. The other kind of use case they want to do here is have, we talk often about AI assistants. They want to give, Anduril at least is described, wanting to have an AI assistant in this. So you can ask dynamically, who is that? How long has that group been over there for? Do we have any other views of that? They give examples of like special forces being in the field and coming across a car and saying to this assistant, how do I hotwire this car? And being guided in AR to do this. Giving military service people superhuman senses and cognition is the long-term goal here. But this, of course, is just the first step of that program. And we will be very closely following to see what does the Army actually say about how these hundreds of units fare in real field testing.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the disconnect here in our audience, right? I'm going to have to... How many people actually enjoyed their time wearing a HoloLens? And it's such a messed up question, because there's going to be plenty of our people in our audience, even I'm thinking of Kyle, who are like, you get used to it. You get used to it, right? And that's the field of view that they're saying they get used to. But every time I ever wore a HoloLens, I noticed pretty uncomfortable optics with separation in the colors that are being presented to me. And it was just like, maybe mine was on wrong. Maybe it was slightly off for me today, right?
No, I mean, I've tried HoloLens too many times. It just isn't good. And this was the case for a lot of these products last decade when it came to things like Magic Leap 1 and HoloLens 2. But we're in the new era now, right? And we have Snap Spectacles, which, while I'll criticize the field of view, we've both tried it. The image is good quality. It's decent quality. And of course, we have Meta's Orion prototype. And we've... this isn't speculation. Palmer Luckey essentially said it. He was asked about what is one of the big benefits coming from this partnership with Anduril and Meta, and he started talking about Meta's silicon carbide lenses. And we talk about how on this show it's wildly impractical to ship that to consumers, because there are actually military export issues with optical grade silicon carbide, and the cost is very high. But we're talking about military products here. $10,000 that we talk about being absurd for consumers is not absurd at all for a military, modern military, especially in an advanced developed country, and not one like the United States, given its huge military spending. And so we could see a situation where you do get, just to be clear, you're getting the field of view of Orion within a couple of years at a very high cost. And then that would actually, as we pointed out before, actually feed back into the consumer market, where Anduril would be building up this supply chain for the military and charging them tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Currently, at this current contract that we're talking about in these low rate initial production, it is hundreds of thousands of dollars per headset it works out to, but over time, tens of thousands. And then eventually that trickles down into a supply chain that consumers can use for consumer AR glasses.
Gosh, we should probably move on, but this is a very an area of deep focus for us where we care deeply about getting this right. So, if you have any information in this space, let us know. You can contact us. Use our tips at uploadvr.com to reach us. We got a lot of other things going on, a lot of consumer things in VR that drive the day to day. But what David just said is absolutely true. Our commenters are aware of this. The things that we talk about here are going to feed into a lot of what we do as consumers. And I don't know, I made a connection there between fiction and what these headsets do, but in a very real way, these devices are going to become uh, symbols of what it means to serve in a military over time. What it means to serve your country are going to be attached to these devices. And whether you're a good person or a bad person serving your military, right, is going to be a subject of public debate. It'll be in media of all kinds. And these devices are like, I don't know, we have a model in our head of stormtroopers, right? Like we've kind of joked in the past that maybe the stormtroopers actually had a misaligned, maybe someone the same flaw that they put in the Death Star, someone put into all of the helmets that the stormtroopers use in Star Wars. Just a really funny joke to imagine that they did that would explain why they can't shoot in the same direction twice, right? It's a funny joke, but ultimately, like, we have to also be serious about the use cases of these headsets for rescue or ending lives.
Yeah, and we're talking about the military right now, and that's where these two companies have started. But it's quite clear from reading and listening to the statements of both Anduril and Rivet that they plan to, at some point, based on my reading of what they're saying, start shipping products for law enforcement as well. And it sounds like they will be a lot more like the Rivet product here. This rather than the Anduril style helmet, but Anduril would also be producing something like this. And this is just the start of this being used for military and law enforcement, and this is going to be a huge area of XR. And one thing I kind of want to point out here is put this in the context of the kind of naysayers that say, VR is going to die out or AR is going to die out, and these are just fads or whatever. Like, look at the context here. This is going to be fundamental to all of the militaries of the world in the coming decade, right? And if you think even in the context of Meta, will Meta recoup its investment? Let's see what kind of licensing deal there is for Meta's technology in military helmets and how many of these are sold over the course of decades.
Yeah, like what David, or like at least what I'm thinking is who is getting the better end of the deal between Anduril and Meta, right? Who is actually bringing more technology to the table? And not just now, but over the length of, I say, 10 to 15 years, right? In 15 years, who is the bigger, more important partner in that relationship to various militaries over the world? That's going to be a very interesting question to watch.
Yeah, and how much of Meta's business over time in Reality Labs does become from military use cases? Because this is not going to be just the U.S. Army in the long term. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of service people across the entire NATO over time. This is not going to be something that's Anduril has talked about. This not being just for US, but also being for NATO allies. And so, you can see this being a massive part of their business over time.
Before we move on, let me just throw out one quick example that I'm really curious about with the Ray-Ban glasses, or with the next generation. Well, I guess we'll talk about with the HUD glasses, but right now I've got USB input on my Quest headset and on my Vision Pro headset. And I actually have a pair of UVC cameras that I bought off of Amazon for something like $15-20. And give me a minute to be weird as heck. Has anyone ever watched the old Dick Van Dyke show where he dreams of having eyeballs in the back of his head because he watched a science fiction movie late at night? You can attach one of these UVC cameras straight to the back of your head. Just plop it on there on a hat or whatever, and now you've got a rear view camera. You can plug that directly into your headset, and in a VR headset that would give you a rear view camera. On an AR headset or even HUD glasses, your HUD essentially there in the corner would be a rear view camera. It's another very obvious use case that is really awkward socially, but you can imagine some use cases where having vision out the back of your head. Some people were mentioning the Mandalorian, and I think Boba Fett had armor that did something like that way back in the day, if you're a Star Wars fan. All right, let's move on for real now.
Yeah, just before we move on, I want to just reply to a couple of comments here. So Clayman is saying, I'm not sure when this comment was, but is saying, I get the Palmer Luckey gets the silicon carbide lenses from Zuckerberg, but what does Zuckerberg get from Palmer? I guess, firstly, we need to know about what the licensing deal is there on a very basic level, like for the silicon carbide lens designs that Meta has come up with through billions of dollars of R&D. When Anduril uses them in a helmet, what percentage of the helmet's price does Meta get? There probably is going to be a licensing agreement. But even beyond that, even if there was 0%, they get a supply chain built out for silicon carbide. Like, silicon carbide is currently the only known material that is going to deliver 70 degree or beyond field of view in sub 100 gram glasses that look somewhat like regular glasses. You can do it with glass in thicker and heavier designs, but in terms of doing it at that kind of bulk, currently, from what we've seen, this could change in the future, the sheer refractive index of silicon carbide is just very hard to beat in that regard. So that Meta gets a supply chain built out that they can then ride the wave of, right? So like the VR revolution happened because Oculus and the others rode the wave of smartphone display panels. That supply chain being built out of high density, small displays. Like the display you're using today in a Quest headset, yes, it's custom. It's not literally going into a smartphone, but it's building off that same giant, high density, high refresh rate LCD supply chain that was built out for smartphones and other devices. And, Apple Vision Pro is a good example of a new supply chain coming out that it didn't come from smartphones, and that's why it's $3,500 in many ways. But, Meta right now cannot ship really great AR glasses, nor can anyone. And if Anduril builds out the supply chain for the wonder material that can do so, well, Meta gets to ride that wave as well. So it's a win-win in that regard.
Question here from LL, and it's a good transitional question to our next subject on smart glasses. So they're asking, Ian, has your Ray-Ban Meta use nosedived since the AI stuff? I'm curious if you got back to regular use. I have stopped wearing it out daily. I still feel a little naked when I don't wear them out. Like I miss them being there on my face a little bit. I do still pull them out for occasions where I think I'm going to want to capture something out when I'm out and about. I used it to capture my e-bike ride from the middle of Manhattan all the way across the Brooklyn Bridge. I had multiple of the glasses. Actually, I switched them out in the middle of the ride, pulled one pair out, put another pair on from my bag that was strapped on my chest, the crossbody strap. Really, really cool videos. I don't look at the videos very often. I tried to produce a cut of that whole ride to Brooklyn and back, and it took me a good hour of editing to produce that video, and I had a nice 15-minute video of my ride that no one else wants to look at, and I don't want to necessarily experience again. So it's an odd format for me to capture, and even though I do capture in it from time to time when there's moments I want to get. So that's the answer to your question.
That does bring us nicely on to our next section. Currently, my usage of Ray-Ban Meta glasses is very much so audio. I really continue to use it. Every single phone call I make since I got them is being on them. It's my favorite way to take phone calls by far. I don't want to take phone calls by holding a phone up or putting in earbuds or headphones anymore. And I also use it to, listen to audiobooks and podcasts as I go for walks. The capture situation is really about convenience. There was actually I was wearing them while driving a few days ago, and I came past a sign that referenced an inside joke with a friend, and I literally just, hit the take picture button, and I was able to capture a picture of that sign, and then later when I'd parked, I could send that photo to a friend. I could have actually just said, hey Meta, take a photo and send it to, and the friend's name. I didn't think about it in the moment, but I could have even done that. But yeah, for me, it's mostly audio, which is interesting given that, the camera is there, but I think it would still be an immensely useful product for me without it. And as we'll talk about soon, Amazon has been making Echo frames for years that are basically Ray-Ban Meta, but without the camera. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic there.
Yeah, and I love the audio features. I've just used them far less since LL's sort of question is asking me. Like since the AI
Sure.
push into the thing, I've just stopped using the audio features more, and it's become only the occasional camera thing for me.
Yeah, so let's get into this topic. The report that Amazon is working on its own HUD glasses, and that will kind of get us in to the next topic where we do a kind of roundup of everyone working on them. But uh, yeah, so according to the information, Amazon is working on Echo HUD glasses for years now, since 2019 for invite only early adopters and 2020 for consumers. Amazon has been selling Echo frames, smart glasses, and they are remarkably similar to the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, except they do not have a camera. They are audio and microphone. You can talk to Alexa. I actually haven't checked if you can talk to the Alexa Plus thing they have now that's LLM based, but that's the kind of product proposition. So, according to the information, Amazon is working on a new generation that does have a camera to directly take on Ray-Ban Meta. So, Echo frames with camera, given Amazon's branding, is probably what they'll call that. But it's also working on next generation Echo frames with a small monocular heads up display, just like what Meta is expected to launch next week, according to all those reports. So, interestingly, Amazon is actually working on two different products. One is for its delivery drivers, and the delivery driver version is monochrome and a bit bulky. So, by monochrome, we mean it shows one color, and that color is always green. We'll get into this soon. Whereas the consumer version, still monocular, still only one eye, but it will be like Meta's glasses are expected to be full color and sleeker. So, according to this report, roughly in the middle of next year, 2026, Amazon intends to ship around 100,000 units of its delivery driver HUD glasses to its delivery drivers to kind of improve their efficiency and make it so that they don't have to bring out their phone all the time, which, Amazon is obviously trying to optimize down to the second how quickly they can do these deliveries. So it'll be interesting to see how well does that work there. And then they will build on that, according to this report, by releasing consumer monocular HUD glasses, but with full color in either late 2026 or early 2027. So around a year after what Meta is intending to launch. So there really are no more details than that from this report, but I was already writing an article that we just kind of published today called Everyone is Making Smart Glasses Now. And let's just get straight into that, because I don't think we need to say anything more about the Amazon ones, because we're going to cover the fact that so many people are making these now. We often cover Meta glasses. We often cover Google's plans to introduce smart glasses with, Android XR, as they call it, but really Gemini is the kind of flagship feature. We also talk about the reports that Apple is working on its own. But as well as these three tech giants, and the reason we cover these tech giants is that they have access to the latest chips earliest, as well as the ability to integrate their communication and app ecosystems. But there are a bunch of different startups that are working on glasses and have been for years now, right? So let's just very quickly talk about the kind of basic history here. Meta is obviously not, to be clear, the first company to release smart glasses with a camera. The first one that looked remotely like normal glasses were called Pivot Head back in 2012, and you can see them here. This was Pivot Head. They didn't have speakers or microphones. They weren't AI glasses. They were literally just a wearable camera that looked somewhat like glasses that went between the two frames. So that was Pivot Head. Then the first kind of ones that actually looked more like regular glasses were, and let me make sure I'm bringing up the right image, because God, these glasses all look the same from certain angles. Epiphany Eyewear. This company called Vergence Labs released in 2013. And you can see this looks remarkably, a decade before, remarkably like Ray-Ban Meta, with the exception again that this did not have speakers or microphones. You're not directly interacting with it. You're not like playing music. There's no buttons really here on this side. This is just camera glasses. And so this company was actually acquired by Snapchat, Snap, the company behind Snapchat, and they used their technology to develop the first three generations of spectacles, which you see here. And spectacles, again, were in last decade, long before Ray-Ban Stories and Ray-Ban Meta, were delivering camera glasses, but again, without speakers. So you're recording with a microphone and a camera, but you're not playing back audio. You can't take phone calls in these things. that's kind of not where that was getting to at that point. And then, as I just mentioned, in addition to this, in around 2019, 2020, Amazon has been selling Echo frames, which are the opposite. They don't have a camera, but they do have microphones and speakers. And so, while other companies, of course, have done this in kind of an enterprise bulky way, the innovation that Meta and EssilorLuxottica did bring to the table with Ray-Ban Stories in 2021 was to just take both of these ideas and put them into one pair of glasses. So you have audio, speakers, and microphones, as well as cameras in the same device. Ray-Ban Stories flopped. They didn't sell well. They didn't have good retention. And Meta was kind of worried that the whole idea was doomed. But then, of course, they released the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, which had much better cameras, much better speakers and microphones, and the kind of flagship feature of being able to talk to Meta AI and do that multimodally as well after a firmware update, where you could literally, look at something and ask the AI assistant about it. So that's kind of a very brief history of the field. But we then want to point out that there are just so many companies making these smart glasses now that it's hard to even list all of them. There's so many Chinese startups that we're not going to list those. But let's talk about some of the main players in the field. So we're going to quickly go through the displayless smart glasses and get to the HUD glasses, which are the really interesting part. These Solos, this company has been doing this for a while. They announced quite soon after Ray-Ban Meta their Solos Ergo Vision, and this here is the Solos Ergo V2. So these are same price, $300, and they let you choose which AI you want to talk to. ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, DeepSeek. And they're a direct competitor to Ray-Ban Meta in that sense. They, pricing wise, you can talk to the AI for free, but if you want to do some advanced stuff, you need to give them a subscription. So Solos, that's one company we want to point out. Another company is, I'm really struggling to not bring up the wrong image because these look so damn similar. The Xiaomi AI glasses, and they were released in July. They're also $300, but they are currently China only. So it's the same kind of concept, but by Xiaomi, the company that makes a lot of Chinese phones and robot vacuums and even cars. And you'd be surprised by how many smart home companies are owned by Xiaomi. Your robot vacuum might actually be owned by Xiaomi, and you might not even realize. Another company in this field, HTC Vive, they have released a Vive Eagle in Taiwan only. It's shipping this month. It's $550, and they're kind of going for a more bold design style here. The image I brought up at the start there were the different colors of the HTC Vive Eagle. But again, all of these products are very similar. They're camera, microphone, and speakers. All the products that I'm talking about so far. A very unique one I want to bring up, because I think they're doing some very interesting work here, is Mentra Live. So what makes these ones unique compared to everything I just said? Well, they have an SDK. It's an open source operating system and SDK so that any developer for free that buys these glasses can run their own apps on the actual glasses and build their own software. So it is $300, available in the United States, and will ship in December. So developers and open source hackers are going to really want to prefer these ones. You get full control over the software. It's literally open source. You can do whatever you want with it if you're a developer. Now,
privacy light on that one, David?
Sorry?
Is there a privacy light on that one?
I'm not sure about that one, but that actually brings us to the next one, because this one, you're not going to like this at all, Ian. You're really not going to like this. So these Waves camera glasses are coming next year, according to the makers. You can see they're putting the battery back here, like some designs, and they have the camera here. And not only does this one not have a camera light, but that is their primary marketed feature. They are boasting about it. They say that this is the glasses that let you record without anyone knowing. This is an American startup, as far as I can tell. Seems to be kind of very young people working on it, from at least their public-facing people. They are, these are kind of college hacker dropout likes, wanting to say, according to them, this is not me, this is them saying, we're in this new era. The idea of a privacy light is the old era. And they're primarily marketing this to creators, as they say, and people making videos for TikTok and Instagram. So just the one last displayless smart glasses I'm going to bring up before we either talk about this or move on to HUD glasses, is Geo Frames. Geo is India's largest mobile network. They want to release a product that is significantly cheaper than everything we just mentioned, specifically for India. And Geo is an interesting company because you may remember that about a year ago, a report came out from the information suggesting that Geo is working with Meta on a very low cost mixed reality headset for the Indian market. So this is going to be, I'm really curious to see what price this comes out at. Geo has a phone they did with Google a few years ago, which was like $40 equivalent. So I think we could see these kind of be the experience we just talked about of displayless smart glasses, but at a much lower cost. So yeah, let's discuss the displayless smart glasses before we talk about the HUD glasses.
Oh goodness. I'm seeing people in our comments trying to figure out what these are good for, and the way you described the one with like they're advertising not having the privacy light, like it's just sort of this pride in the fact that there are no legal means of stopping yet what these things do, and we're doing our best to sort of educate people about their uses and how they're being used. Let's see here. There were a couple comments here to specifically talk about, but I got to go back to kind of. I want to talk about the capture of memories. I got to go back to that previous situation where we talked about where it's not normal for you get someone in your family that goes, everyone's together here for Christmas, let's all take a photo together. And so everyone goes, okay, I was just looking at my phone. Fine, I'll get in front of the Christmas tree or in front of the house. And the 10 people that are gathered together all smile for the camera. We have a thing we're supposed to say called cheese in order to make it look like we're all happy for the camera, and we pose. And what we just spent the last 15 years or 20 years with phones that let us capture all sorts of like off the moment things that we didn't plan. We don't have to pose anymore to capture things. It's the phone, it's the camera that's with us all the time. Glasses are with us even more than phones. They're on our face and they're rather ready to be activated more quickly. And I just have to go back and say that the only social situation I can imagine where these things start to make sense for capturing the faces of other people is that thing with Whist and the multi-camera system that I'm talking about, where, hey, everybody, let's get together and remember this moment of us all gathered together at the family reunion. Hey, where are we today? Oh, hey. And you have like a 5-minute conversation of just commemorating this moment together of you all gathered together, and you use multiple cameras for this moment commemorating the event. None of these glasses you just described are built for that kind of social occasion I just described.
Yeah, they're not, but they're built for something very different, which is instant spontaneity. So, I see I often talk about how I look at the reviews of products. I go on to regular retailers and go down and read what people are using, and I see so many parents specifically saying that this is how they're able to capture memories of their children that they would never be able to capture. Because sure, you're right. If you want to get a great volumetric capture, you can set up your multiple cameras and get the child to do something. But how often are the memories that you want to capture in that literal moment right now? And by the time you got your camera set up, it's gone. They're both kind of memories, right? Some of them that you can set up the camera for, and some of them, if you don't press that camera button instantaneously, like you covered with catching the ball at the baseball game, you're missing it, right? So I think that's what these are kind of very pitched at from the camera aspect. But it's interesting that the marketing for a lot of these now is not about the capture, right? Ray-Ban Stories had the capture, but the Ray-Ban Meta took off because the marketing is around the AI. Every single one of these products I just brought up, their primary marketing, they talk about how you can talk to AI and do multimodal AI. And that's the way I use the Ray-Ban Meta glasses camera more than capture. I would use it for asking about something I'm seeing far, far, far more than I would do about actually capturing a photo. So it'll be interesting to see a dynamic over time. Is there anything else we wanted to say about displayless smart glasses, or do we want to go into our rundown of HUD glasses?
Yeah, I think there was just one question there, or one comment. It was just the uses here that, yeah, where is it? Glasses that record without showing their recording would make sense for protesters and undercover journalism. It's illegal in certain places to record without your subject's permission. and then in other places it's perfectly legal to do so. And that's not even discussing what's right, what's morally right, what's a good thing to do. And that's a separate, a whole separate discussion. But I wanted to mention that from Davin of just when we go back to our AI discussion and the idea of injecting AI into these systems, it ends up being like a divider on, are you using these to police people, or are you using them to protest? Are you using them for legal means that are like, yeah, it's just a lot of things to think about. And I appreciate you, Davin, for sort of poking into these issues before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on, I do want to point out that these wave glasses have seen significant controversy. I've seen on social media as part of the research for this article, people were very furious about the idea that this is intentionally designed to let you capture without people knowing. As far as I can tell, all of these other ones are showing a privacy LED. It does seem to be a standard. And this is how this startup's differentiating yourself. They haven't answered the multiple questions from people about what happens if you try to use these in a state that doesn't allow that kind of recording. They've refused to answer that as far as I can see, the last time I checked.
Well, it's interesting. Like what was it? Kent By over at the Voices of VR podcast. You can listen to him. I think we were talking with him at some event, and he was talking about just this. You could have social norms in some places where these camera glasses are already kind of affecting, like they're already noted. To your point, David, if I saw someone wearing Waves branded glasses, I might be moved to say, "Hey, excuse me, are you recording right now?" Just because you've informed me that brand is used in that way, to not inform me of that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think they are. Look, they are one of these startups, like, I don't know if people follow the AI world, but like Cluely, where the controversy is part of the point and that's part of their marketing. And we can, I'm not going to.
I found Friend posters here in New York. Have you seen Friend?
Yes. Avi's Friend. Yeah. That's another startup by these kind of Gen Z founders where the controversy, they understand for right or for wrong that the currency of the modern world is attention, and one of the easiest ways to get attention is controversy. And so, it's
not a great way to make a product necessarily, though.
No, it's not. I very much so agree with you there, but that's what they're doing, and unfortunately for a lot of Gen Z, that does seem to work, and I do underscore the word unfortunately there. So let's move on to talk about glasses with a display, and this is the one we really want to point out before next week, where Meta launches theirs, because we want to point out that Meta is very much so not the only company that is doing this or has done this. So I have a little chart here in the article that shows you that none of the ones so far released or announced by any major company that we would take seriously and think will actually intend to ship are both full color and binocular. So you can get full color in one eye, or you can get green only monochrome in two eyes, but you can't get both in any of these products yet. And so, that's a very interesting dynamic. So to be clear, we've moved on now to talk from displayless glasses to ones with a display, but we're still not talking about AR glasses. All of these glasses that we're about to discuss are HUD glasses. They show you a small heads-up display fixed in your view, in some cases in both eyes, and in other cases in one eye, and in some cases with full color imagery, and in other cases in just green. So, so I want to also be clear that we're not talking here about display glasses, like virtual monitor glasses, like X-Real, because as I rant about, and I'm not going to get into too much, those kind of sit so far off your face and dim your view so much, they cannot show imagery without dimming your view that you can actually see with any opacity, that they're not suitable for this kind of all day walking around use case. And those devices so far are also not standalone, so you have to wire them down. These are HUD glasses that are, pretty much as thin as regular glasses. So let's kind of walk through this step by step. The first we want to bring up is the North Focals, which are discontinued. And why are they discontinued? So these were very much ahead of their time. This is the first sort of regular looking glasses that have a monocular HUD and full color. And they were released all the way back in 2019. and they have a kind of cult following in our industry because of how incredible it was that North pulled this off back in 2019. And what happened? So they had North Vocals 2.0 in development, and then they got acquired by Google a year later in 2020, and 2.0 was cancelled. So you can argue about, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing for North, but North's DNA exists today in the HUD glasses that Google is showing off at conferences like I/O, but they are not themselves releasing North branded products anymore. So Google has not yet announced a specific product with a HUD, nor have any of their partners. Their messaging suggests that the first Gemini smart glasses will be displayless smart glasses, like we just discussed. But we want to note North as being a pioneer here and the first company to ship something for $600 6 years ago that is kind of somewhat on the same kind of level that we're talking about with these new wave of glasses. So North, very ahead of their time. Very good idea for Google to acquire them, but bad, obviously, for consumers because then they didn't get North technology. Is there anything you want to sort of say there, or do we want to run through the other HUD glasses?
No, I think we should run through these as quickly as we can. A very smart story from David here to go read up on UploadVR.com ahead of MetaConnect next week, where we expect that to be the kind of focus of their discussion, what they're going to try to focus everyone around, making us think that the metaverse is now AI and glasses is my expectation. But yeah, we'll talk about our predictions soon enough, but let's just get through this.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you say, the reason we want to get this out is so that people know that Meta is not the first. It's not to say that Meta might not be the best. Who knows? We'll have to see. Maybe they are the worst, but we just want to make clear, regardless of how good or bad Meta's product is, they were not the first. So the next company I want to talk about is Even Realities. So they are a Chinese startup with a German subsidiary. A lot of people think they're German. They are not. They are actually Chinese, but they have this product called Even G1. So it is binocular, but monochrome. It comes in two different styles. You can see the circular and rectangular here that I'm toggling between. You can see the circular one worn here and the rectangular one worn here. And it's remarkable how thin and light these things are. So one thing I want to note about North actually is that it doesn't have a camera, nor does Even Realities G1. And in fact, Even G1 does not have speakers either. So this is very much so about giving you a small monochrome HUD. So it's binocular in both eyes, but monochrome, green only. And the idea here is that it is used for text reading purposes. So one of the primary use cases people use the Even G1 for is as a teleprompter. And Palmer Luckey actually wore and used these glasses on stage at TED when he gave his presentation. So he had his teleprompter in his Even G1 glasses. And that's a huge use case of this. You're going to green only, but in both eyes, text entry. Another thing people use it for is translation and subtitles. So if you have hearing difficulties, you can get subtitles for the real world because they do have microphones. They just don't have speakers. The other use case that people use it for is translation, as well as turn-by-turn navigation. So you actually can get, it's not like a, high resolution color mini map or anything. It's literally just like a little what your next turn is on these Even glasses. And so they weigh 40 grams, which is 10 grams less than Ray-Ban Meta, and they start at $600 in the US. And you can get your prescription on them, just like pretty much all the glasses we're going to talk about today. So they shipped early this year. So Even G1, very cool glasses. And I think this is a great example of something we talk about on the show of designing around a very specific constraint. They're not trying to be everything. They're focusing on showing you text in your both eyes. Okay, so that's Even G1. Let's talk about Brilliant Labs Halo. So Brilliant Labs, I see brought up in our comments a lot, and we're really glad to be finally able to cover them. These are interesting glasses. They're from a Singapore-based startup that is ready on its third product. Its first product back in 2023 was called Monocle. It was literally what it sounds like, a monocle that attached onto your existing glasses. So they weren't even real glasses. Their next product last year was called Frame, and it had a monocular HUD that was very visible. It literally had this like kind of visible on the lens view, was kind of using something somewhat similar to Birdbath, like a prism optic, but it didn't look good at all and didn't have very great reviews. Their third product has had pre-orders open for last month, and it's called Halo. You can see it on screen right now. Brilliant Labs Halo. So Halo glasses is full color but monocular. So like Meta's Hypernova expected to be, one eye but full color. It has bone conducting speakers, so you get private audio, and they also put the batteries back here behind your ear. Very interesting design. It has speakers, microphones, a camera that they describe interestingly as not a camera. It's not for capturing photos and videos. It's called a low power optical sensor. So it's designed specifically for AI models, talking to AI. Rather than actually capturing images for use. It's not built for that. And I think you could probably with the SDK, but the quality wouldn't be good. And so out of the box, it has its AI called Noah, and they talk about how you can vibe code your own apps by talking to Noah and telling it what you want to do. But they also have an SDK for apps that you run on your smartphone or other connected Bluetooth device, as well as the ability to run Lua scripts. If you're a developer, you'll know what that is, on the glasses themselves. So this is very much so kind of targeted at developers in many ways. Also weigh 40 grams, and they are $300 to pre-order. So that's actually a remarkably low price given what they are. So that is the Brilliant Labs Halo glasses. The next glasses we're going to talk about are the Holiday glasses. If I can find them here. Yep. So the Holiday glasses shipped in limited quantities early this year. They are monocular and monochrome, so they're only in one eye and only one color. They are $500, and they are kind of, again, focused on that same kind of use case as the G1 glasses, giving you like subtitles and things like that. They're kind of just giving you text input and such, but they're a little less expensive, and they are not binocular. Next one is the Rokid glasses. We're almost through these. Rokid has been making X-Real style display glasses for years. This is their first push into kind of regular looking smart glasses. They are binocular but monochrome, like even G1. Don't worry, I'll bring the chart up again at the end so we can kind of recap that. And they are $600, and they will ship in September. The other HUD glasses that we were discussing were the ones from Amazon, but we've already brought them up. So before we move on from this topic, I will just bring up that chart again so we can kind of have a little recap of what these products all are.
So Brian asking, when will these companies stop offering monocular glasses that only work in one of the two eyes? Not everyone has good vision or any vision in both eyes. You're asking a fundamental question. And David's last 20 minutes of talking as I glazed over thinking about all these different glasses is ultimately pointing out that you're about 2 years away from the market figuring out what works here. And right?
Yeah. So as you can see here, there are glasses that will give you binocular in both eyes, but only the color green. So you're not getting both. Some of that is down to the challenges around how you integrate the kind of LCOS displays that are the practical way to do low cost color. Some of it is down to what Andrew Bosworth talked about when we talked a few weeks ago about the difficulties of aligning image. Some of it's just sheer cost and battery drive, but no one will currently give you both. But if you really wanted binocular, you could pick up the even G1. If you just want, your teleprompter and subtitles and directions, you could pick up the Rokid glasses, which you're doing more, or some of these other kind of glasses here, Rokid glasses. But I mean, look, I'm really curious to see, are all of the monocular glasses as bad as the prototypes I've tried? I haven't tried Halo or Meta's one yet, and I tried North so many years ago and didn't like the monocular, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and I don't know. We'll see if this is a bad road to go down. But you remember the Virtual Boy from the 1990s? I saw someone mention it early in the show. That was it wasn't even a head-mounted display. You can't call it head-mounted. It was a stationary tripod headset that you set up on a stand, and then you put your face into it, and you had one color to view. It was red. Well, today that color red could be very useful on some of those glasses we talked earlier in the thing for outlining certain
Yeah.
things in your field of view, right?
So yes, but green is there's not a coincidence that all of these glasses use green. It's because it is the easiest to manufacture micro LED color. So a lot of there are micro like this is micro LED. A lot of these companies are using for these uh, binocular green only displays. We're not talking about LCD or OLED. We're talking about that next generation display that we always talk about being years off. It's shipping these glasses, but the massive caveat that we should always say when we're saying micro LED is years off is full color micro LED at high resolution. So you're right to say that red would have a lot of advantages, but green is the easiest to manufacture at the moment.
But here's where I'm going with bringing that up as an example. Can we draw a through line in manufacturing capabilities from red being able to be provided in the 1990s to OLED displays here in 2025 of mass quantities that you can actually ship headsets in?
So red is easier than blue. The really hard one is blue. And I don't know if you remember, but like even to do regular, not micro, blue LEDs took a very, very long time. That is why, for so many years, and you'll see this today, even if you're a younger person in all of science fiction and movies, you see these green and red displays on all of these old systems. It was never blue because that's the one that was hard. And one of the greatest breakthroughs of the 20th century actually was figuring out how to mass produce blue LEDs, and that kind of spawned the whole LED lighting revolution that we see today.
Mm. I like Steve's comment that he recalls the human eye being able to distinguish more colors of green than any
That's
other.
true. Yep. So they prioritize green. So in something like the PlayStation VR 2's display that is pentile, doesn't have full RGB, they have the full amount of green subpixels, but not blue and red. So you do get an advantage that not only is it easy to manufacture, but it's also the one that the human eye is most sensitive to. So it actually also helps here. So you're getting, the resolution is the how sharp that will be and clear to you is actually going to be better if it's green for most people.
Yeah, I was talking about this. There's a lot of people talking about a lot of different things here in the comments. So if you have anything specific about the glasses, I would bring that up here before we move on to the next section. But I see people talking about all sorts of different things here, and they're talking about Game Boy and emulating old things, and I want to talk about that. So we should talk about glasses before we start talking about that fun stuff.
Yeah, so I'm just having a look for any comments here. See some people getting confused between monochrome and monocular. So white bar there. It is annoying that these are so similar in terms, but Meta's glasses, according to all the rumors we've seen, and again, Meta hasn't announced anything. This is all about rumors and reports. To be fair, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman claims to have literally warned them, so he's not just it's not like, oh, someone heard this. He according to him, put the glasses on his head. So it's full color, not monochrome, but monocular in one eye, not binocular. So hopefully this chart makes that a little bit easy to see, because if we are just throwing these terms around, I can see how that could easily be very, very confusing.
We had a joke about it on a previous show about those two terms, and I almost want to see a T-shirt that has, monocolor definition on the front and then monocular definition on the back. And the irony of talking about those two terms is like you're talking about the two easiest ways to cut cost in a head-mounted displays. Oh, we'll just ship less color or less eyes. That's not a good idea.
I mean, something I really wonder here is who's going to be the first to ship, HUD glasses that are both, binocular and full color. I think it's going to be super interesting to see who manages to pull that off.
Someone made a joke. What was it called? Wasn't called eye sockets. What was they were talking about the pirate. What would be the Apple equivalent? Eyelids was what I thought would be a funny name for the Apple Vision Pro before it actually got named. But someone had a good pirate name for Apple if they had done one of these. I want to talk briefly about there's just a mention of recreating they're talking about Citra 3D, I think, and experiencing those games that were used to be released on the glasses-free 3D display from Nintendo, the 3DS and all that. You can bring those games into 3D inside of a Quest headset today, and you don't need Nintendo's permission to do it, right? Like you can hack this together and make this happen for yourself. And it's a really, really beautiful statement about the nature of VR headsets and this media being a free space for you to view what you want the way you want it. And I love all that our commenters are kind of going to that place, even with minor prompting from me, while we've been discussing all these glasses that are just so very, very far away from making stuff like that happen.
Yeah, I think we can move on to our Porsche and BMW section now. We're not going to talk about this for long, but we do want to note them. So let's talk firstly about what Porsche showed off a few days ago. And so
It was the Apple IE patch. Sorry, that was from Davin.
that's a dad joke level idea. Anyway, yeah. So
thank you, Davin. Let's move on to BMW. All right.
Yeah, sorry. Well, Porsche first. So they were showing off their new 911 Turbo in a big, like, hyped up YouTube presentation. And halfway through, they have Patrick Dempsey, the racer and actor, there. And halfway through, they ask him if he wants to see the drivetrain, and they say, "Do you want to join us?" And he says yes. And he pulls out an Apple Vision Pro and he puts it on, and he's here with, Porsche's like head of Turbo and head of Drivetrain. I can't remember their titles. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this. And they walked around this room and were able to see all of the elements of the turbo and other aspects of the drivetrain at larger than life scale first, and then at true scale, holding in their hands, and then, on the floor while they're walking around, fully co-located. And we don't know whether this is using visionOS 26's built-in co-location. visionOS 26 is obviously still in beta, so Porsche could just be running the beta, or they could be doing their own co-location. But why we're covering this and why this matters is because this is a trend we've actually been seeing from a lot of enterprise companies that are using mixed reality for CAD visualization. So this is not a new use case. They have been doing it for years now. Varjo is one of the companies that's really been providing the headsets for years. But since around 2018, 2019, when Varjo started providing these kind of retinal headsets to companies, they had this choice between very high fidelity PC based VR and mixed reality with Varjo and the likes, or low fidelity but fully standalone and wireless Quest simulations that were really cartoony and low detail and all aliased and low resolution. And so a lot of companies were stuck between this choice for quite a while, and it limited what they could do, right? Imagine trying to do the same situation where they're walking around this entire room with Varjo cables, going over them. It's not the same thing at all. So Apple Vision Pro has been really interesting in enterprise, and we've been covering, some stories of Apple Vision Pro in enterprise. It's interesting because it's a midpoint that a lot of them are finding really, really appealing, and we're actually seeing a lot of companies talk about using Vision Pro because it gives them something that is far closer to the fidelity of PC, and with the 4K micro OLED displays that give you real good sharpness and clarity for small details, but has the freedom of being standalone. It's not wireless. You have a wire going down to your back pocket, but that's essentially wireless, right? In terms of how that lets you walk around the room, of standalone. So they get very high fidelity and they get full standalone freedom. And so that's why Apple Vision Pro has actually been rapidly adopted in enterprise. There's been other outlets covering this, including some of the wider tech media. Like I've also seen, I think it was the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal that was covering the rapid growth of companies using Apple Vision Pro for CAD visualization. And it's great for design meetings and being able to walk around like this with people and show them things at true one-to-one scale, while not having to have everyone tethered to a PC and all of the issues that causes. So Porsche is just one example of a company doing this. And Porsche actually plans now to start doing its press briefings with Apple Vision Pro using a combination. Here's the image they're showing of their concept here. A combination of local co-located Vision Pro wearers and remote journalists in Apple Vision Pro using personas. So they plan to conduct briefings and meetings. They haven't solidified that, but they're saying they're looking into meetings too for the company, where they are using Apple Vision Pro to combine people being physically present and remotely present to do these kind of CAD presentations. And the personas of Vision Pro, this image is actually from visionOS 2, so it's the old personas, not the new upgraded ones. And so this is something that companies like Porsche are finding interesting. And yeah, I think this is something interesting to cover because Apple Vision Pro is at the quality and portability that it's really starting to deliver on some of these very old promises in this industry. And some people wonder when we talk about the rumors of Apple upgrading the Vision Pro from the M2 to the M4 or M5, like, do we really need more compute on this thing? It's already a beast. And the one group of Vision Pro users that are screaming out for every teraflop that they can get is enterprise. They want to do these simulations at higher quality, higher resolution, higher detail, more elements. And so, $3,500, as we always say, is a ridiculous price for most consumers. Understand our audience's reaction a lot of the time of like, why are you covering this? It doesn't matter. For enterprise, it's nothing. For a company like Porsche, $3,500 is nothing for what this lets them do and what it will let them do in the long term.
Yeah, very deep discussion there. We've got a couple more here we need to talk about, right? Related to car use. I'm reminded just of all the people that have left the industry from, I don't know, 2015 to 2020. They believed in PCVR. They believed in these visualizations. There were backpack PCs that could do some of these high-end simulations, but you put a backpack on a person, you put this car in front of them, you got three people all there together. They weren't they weren't co-located correctly. Maybe you were running at half frame rate or 45 frames per second, even in that backpack situation, and it didn't feel good after you spent 45 minutes going over a design review. I could easily see in an Apple Vision Pro doing a design review and then going and watching a movie. Or, gosh, the model that makes perfect sense, really, ultimately, is Megalopolis, right? This movie comes out, and it's not a great movie, but you could have enough journalists interested in actually going and interviewing the director of Megalopolis, and you could put a whole bunch of VR, a whole bunch of Vision Pro journalists to go do a one-to-one interview with this elderly director who can't actually physically get necessarily to all the places that they need to for a press tour that a 40-year-old actor could do, right? Now you've got this whole system flipped around such that you get access to people who need access to get good interviews out of things. This is a really, really interesting model I would love to see attached to different things.
Yeah, it really is this promise that we talk about a lot, and that Meta had this tagline of "defy distance," of being able to feel present whether you're there or not. I'm really, really fascinated to see how this kind of turns out over time, for sure. And I think the other thing we want to point out when we bring up how this is an old idea, but it's now finally being done right. That's a theme of VR download a lot now that we're getting into the middle of the 2020s decade, that so many of the things that we start to talk about, people may rightly point out they aren't new. It's not someone came up with a new idea, and they were tried very hard by passionate, intelligent people a decade ago, but the technology just wasn't there. There were people that tried to build iPhones in the 90s. It's sometimes, no matter how hard you try, if the technology isn't there yet, it's not going to work. And as well as having these kind of low resolution PC based headsets and, backpack PCs and all this other clunk, another category that people tried to do was to do this with see-through AR headsets like HoloLens 2 and Magic Leap 1. And so you did get the wireless standalone thing here, but you didn't have, the same level of compute or resolution, and critically, you didn't have the field of view. So instead of seeing this car, you saw a small slice at once as you turned around. And so much of Microsoft's pitch for companies with HoloLens was this exact kind of thing. And you will actually probably be able to go back, and I'm sure a very, enterprising viewer will be able to find an image from Microsoft that probably looks something like what we have up here, except
Almost,
the
right?
difference is in Apple Vision Pro, it really looks like this. And on HoloLens, it's seeing a little postage stamp view.
What David's describing is HoloLens actually had the 3D audio nailed. So the 3D, you could go into a HoloLens shared mesh experience with other HoloLens 2 users and be like, you're over here, and I know that because I can hear the audio coming from the right spots in space around me. And I'd be willing to wager 1-to-1 Microsoft's audio technology for mesh and spatial audio technology is almost as good as, if not as good as, the Apple Vision Pro's 3D spatial audio technology. The difference is the postage size visuals and the sense that I don't, even if David hasn't talked for 5 minutes, I still know where he is in space because I didn't need to have, I didn't need to echolocate like a bat to know where he is in the room with me.
Yeah, exactly. The issue was not software. There were some really interesting, great ideas in the HoloLens software and in Magic Leaps. And as I always say, a lot of the people at Magic Leap who worked on Lumen OS for Magic Leap 1 literally got hired by Apple to build Vision OS. There's a lot of cross pollination here. And what we call Apple and Magic Leap and Microsoft, these are dynamic, changing things. This gets into the philosophy of the ship of Theseus. What is a company? Is it, when does a constituent employee base become another one? Let's not get into that. The point I'm trying to make here is they were doomed, no matter how great their software was, by the hardware just not being there. And we're now in this era where we are getting excellent headsets. Right now, they're $3,500, but we're going to see these capabilities trickle down in the coming years into more and more affordable products, and then they'll be able to scale up. Are we ready to talk about BMW's kind of quite different use case then?
Yeah, run us through it, David.
Sure. So this Vision Pro use case we just talked about with Porsche is at very small scale. This is in one design studio where they might have, I have no idea how many headsets Porsche has, but let's say it's not hundreds. It's probably at most dozens. That's just a guess. I don't know. But BMW's use case is quite different here. They are using Quest 3 mixed reality to train technicians to repair their electric vehicle batteries at scale. So electric vehicle batteries are obviously very, very complicated things. They are these giant kind of complexity machines of cells and wiring and fasteners, and getting in and repairing, one cell or kind of issues within them is very, very challenging. So they built this app that they call at BMW Impossible Battery that uses Quest 3 to let technicians go in and learn at true scale with virtual tools how to repair it. And interestingly, these virtual tools are not simulated as physical interactions because they don't want to have like clunky interactions where a VR controller is trying to mimic a tool that looks nothing like it. And that's not the purpose. These technicians know how to use a tool, okay? That's not what they are being trained on. They're being trained on understanding the intricacies of the battery itself. So how this works is you actually just point the controller, you pick a tool in a menu, you point the controller at where you want the tool to be used, and then the tool uses itself. That's not what you're learning here because you're never going to really be able to learn that this way. You're learning the details of the battery. So a couple of interesting tidbits here. One is that their first prototype was fully immersive VR with a VR background, and you're in a VR technician studio or a mechanic garage kind of thing. And apparently the technicians really didn't like that, and they wanted to be in the real room, so they started to use mixed reality, and they much preferred that. And then they could have an instructor standing there that helped them as well. And again, you can integrate co-location there and have both people be able to do this. The other interesting tidbit is that they are planning to kind of do this at scale with leaderboards where they actually track how long it takes people to do repairs, and they're trying to create some competition between different repair training centers and seeing how people can do this. So this is obviously still an early experiment. They are using it to train actual technicians, though. It's not just some prototype demo. Again, we're talking about this trend of things that were concept demos 10 years ago. This is actually being used, but they still are in the early stages of figuring out how they want to roll this out, but they do want to do it at scale. And that's part of the reason that they're using Quest 3 here instead of Vision Pro, because doing, Porsche's thing with, my guess, dozens of headsets, and doing this at BMW's, electric vehicle scale of technicians, which is, we're going to be talking about hundreds, if not thousands, maybe in the very long term, tens of thousands of headsets. You're going to need a headset that's a lot more affordable than Vision Pro there. So really interesting stuff. They're also using it as a visualization tool. They say that they're testing, doing things like showing how the electricity and coolants flow, and then being able to understand that as literally let the technician understand not just a checklist of what to go through, but why you're doing what you're doing, showing them an X-ray view of how the coolant, being cut off in this area affects this part of the battery, and the heat here, and how the electricity stops. All of these kind of interesting use cases. So visualization with Porsche, training and simulation with BMW, massive use cases. And I just want to underscore that enterprise VR and mixed reality is, according to all the people I've spoken to, seeing really quite massive growth.
I don't know what people in the comments are noticing. What I noticed out there in that last section, your audio got a little distant for about 30 seconds or a minute, and then you came back to it. So it sounds good to me now. Um, the the thing I was going to mention here is I want varifocal or multifocal. I don't know if I necessarily need varifocal, but for work like this and the work that I've started messing around in my latest experiments in Vision Pro and Quest is messing with things near field in mixed reality. So like there's apps for tracing and practicing your art, and you can trace on a piece of paper right in front of you. There's a whole bunch of apps for this right now. But my eyes are suffering most of the time that I'm doing that close-up hand work with a pencil looking at mixed reality through the pass-through cameras. Very much like a whole nother mode of visual acuity and focus on close-up things, exactly like here, if it was tools, that just make this whole thing feel a lot better in my near field.
Yeah, that's so. Sometimes you bring up the idea that some people push back on of going higher end than Vision Pro, and I often say, that for the consumer market that doesn't make sense. But if we come back to talking about like that kind of use case of doing CAD modeling all day long in mixed reality, I think you do start to see for some of these giant companies that maybe there is a market for a Vision Pro Max or a Vision Pro Ultra or whatever Apple wants to call it that does go to $5,000 or $10,000 in the same way that you have like a Mac Pro or something that goes into that sort of era and does put in things like varifocal lenses. And I think the really weird thing about BMW's use case, to come back to it, is it's so weird that they're just using the same consumer Quest 3 that we all use, right? They're not using any magic. It's this same kind of headset that's designed to be fitting within $500 price point, and it's like there's a gap here. There's definitely, as well as there being space for a Vision Pro Max or whatever you call it above, as we constantly say about the consumer market, and just as importantly in the enterprise market, there is a massive gap between $500 and $3,500, and I think there's a huge potential for one of these companies to start actually filling that as well.
Yep. I love that. And thank you so much for that context, David, because it really brought it home exactly why I was sort of going in there. It was, I don't know, a year ago now that I was talking about that idea of there being a market above $3,500 for VR headsets, and musicians and artists who are doing work with their hands. That's $5,000 for something that lets you augment that experience and make it even as visually comfortable as it is just looking at it straight on, while augmenting and adding all the extra tools on there. It's just we're not ready for it. You're not ready. Like, our audience isn't ready for professionals to pick computers for their job because it does that for them. Like, we're all waiting for it, but we're not sold on $5,000 VR headset actually improving my work yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes forward. Once a tool is valuable and even vital to your creative or professional workflow, the value proposition of the price starts to become dramatically different. And I mean, you see Sony attacking that as well, right? With their enterprise headset. We don't really talk about it much, but they are doing literally that. They have a $5,000 headset. It's not that it pushes further than Vision Pro in any way. You can argue about whether or not that does have the value proposition that justifies that, but at least, with their enterprise headset, that is kind of what they're specifically gearing it for. Are we ready to move on to our meta section, starting with that Washington Post report that you covered?
Yeah, Nicholas out there just pointing out that Vario and Xtal are already up there for certain niches, talking about aeronautical use cases, training. Imagine a cockpit in front of you where every single switch needs to be as close to its actual placement as it actually is when you're actually in a real cockpit, so that all of your skills transfer. Absolutely. But what David and I are kind of insistent on, and what we spend sometimes hours in this studio arguing with our audience about, is like, oh, software is amazing, but you need to apply that software to lowering the price of hardware and finding this happy medium where it's just $800 and now artists are making art on the street in this new way with their hands. And we don't want it to be locked behind $3,500. Neither of us do, but we also need the cameras to get better so that more artists can do this without getting a headache after 20 minutes because the focus isn't right on what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's move on to the meta.
Yeah, some of these details around the margin really start to matter when you're doing 5 or 10 hours a day in a headset. And yeah, there's when you're doing 5 or 10 hours, the value proposition of this dramatically changes.
Sorry, I've never drawn out the United States. And one of the apps, Contour, in Quest 3, one of the very first options you get is a map of the United States. You take it, you put it down on the paper, you take your Quest controller to make sure it's synced up. And here I am taking a pencil and outlining the United States. And I only did it once, but I took off the headset and I had a beautiful map of the United States and all the lines between it. And I was filling in all the states that I could remember offhand just based on their shape out in front of me. And it's absurd. It's absurd that like you could take a class full of sixth graders and have them draw that map 5 or 10 times. They only have to do it. You come in each day. On day 1, you draw that map once. You come in the next day, you draw that map a second time. And at the end of day 10 of drawing that map 10 times, you can probably draw the map pretty well from memory, right? And suddenly now you've got a better understanding of the map of the United States just by practicing this thing 10 times in your headset. And right, like now we need to go and talk to people about the all the other things about geography, right? That we need to learn. Why are the lines where they are, and that we can do that. But it's just absurd to me that we have this tool available to us, and it will ultimately save time in learning very complex subjects. But it's all burned into our brains the way we learn things. It's hard for us to see the benefits of what I just described.
Yeah, I think very much so, as well as enterprise education is something that we want to keep a very close eye on. Yeah, and there are a few companies that have started to use that Meta for Education system that they kind of rolled out earlier this year. So it'll be interesting to see when we have like pilot studies from schools, what kind of effectiveness that has.
James pushing back on me. I've played a song on Piano Vision hundreds of times. I can't play a thing without my headset on. Absolutely accurate, right? But you put those two things together. Take a trained musician to help you in Piano Vision, and now build a curriculum for it. And we're going to have to see how those studies really reveal how much time is saved. I'm just convinced that we all, as people who learned a different way, have to come at this with open eyes and just not assume it's going to be faster, but really set up the experiments for success so that they could be faster if they really did help people do things faster.
I think it's still, it's early days. It's very, very early days around here. And there's still, I mean, we've literally only just got in the past few years headsets that can even do mixed reality and computer vision. And literally only this year can you actually start to do computer vision in the headsets. I want to, maybe this is part of the VR download drinking game, but I want to just underscore just how early we are and how much room there is for learning and improvement here in terms of these approaches. But let's get on to this meta topic that you covered, unless you have anything else to add there. Do we want to get into that?
Yeah, no, I'm just mad at the commenters who are just like, it sounds like torture, what I just described, the 10 things. You know what? Reading a book sounds like torture, right? Reading a book with a teacher who's not interested in subject matter, and right, like, I just think of how failed my education was by a teacher not being invested in turning the text that we're reading into actually consumable, interesting content. So it's just really frustrating for me to see our audience that is so visionary about this stuff also grapple with, I don't believe the benefits until you actually show me the study. I get that, right? We want to see the benefits too, but also just, you can't look at our existing education system and say that was the best we could possibly do.
Well, yeah, we're going to show them as we get these stories over time. Yeah, there are companies that are working with this, and we will be covering it in coming years. So we have Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, in our comments, and he has said, "Early, I thought we were a decade into this industry. It's both. You're right, and I'm right. We are a decade into this industry, and that is very, very early. Just as in the 1980s, you would have been a decade into the personal computing industry, and yet the 1980s was still very, very early. The one thing I want to get across on this show for people interested in where is this industry going is that we are still in the early days, as
David,
much
can
as
I
that's
get a high five? All right. So in Apple Vision Pro, if I do a high five, we get a nice little cool animation in midair. James and I experienced it. It gives us a nice little glowy, good feeling. And James and I went and did high five 3 or 4 times once we realized we did this cool thing. Next decade, David and I want a pair of gloves that we put on. And when we do that, we get a little bit of pressure right against the palm of our hands, exactly as we should. We're not, we are early to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, another kind of James O'Loughlin is bringing up the kind of point that, you know, technically we're 60 years into the industry because AR and VR is that old. Yeah, I'm talking about like when this became a consumer market. The analogy I often bring up here is that the first electric car was released in the 1890s. And I want to say that again, the 1890s, as in well over a century ago. But of course, you don't say the electric car industry is over 100 years old. In practice, it started, with the Tesla Roadster in 2008. Then
Arguably, it took 100 years to become commercially viable again.
Yes, exactly. So there were obviously the primitive VR and AR technologies, for decades and decades and decades. But in terms of something that is viable, that, to put it in a blunt way, doesn't suck, that only happened in the 2010s for VR and electric cars, right? It's the same analogy. With the first really practical electric car that you would actually want to own without compromise was the original Tesla Model S in 2012. So even well over 120 years later, it took for it to be kind of practical at that point.
But there were stereograms in the 1800s too, right? Like people understood that each eye sees different images. It's just taken us 150 years to get the commercial things so that each eye is captured. The cameras are now capturing each independent image and presenting it at 60 frames per second. It's all related. Let's move on to this meta section.
Yeah. I mean, this has been fun, the last one I want to just give on this analogy, just before we move on, is neural networks as well. Deep learning and neural networks, decades and decades old, but we just didn't have the compute to make it work.
I love this. Earl Grey, electric cars still suck. And then Gigo... No, they really don't, right?
They really don't. I don't want to get into this topic, but I know quite a bit about it. And yeah,
you press the button and you're at 60 miles per hour. Come on, shut up. You're wrong.
Yeah. So I own still a regular internal combustion engine car, but every time I go to a different country that's quite far away, I rent an electric car. And yeah, I will definitely, my next car will be an electric car, is all I can say. Let's not get into this debate, but they are, they're better. They are 100% better. And I say that as someone who owns an internal combustion engine car that I like quite a lot. Anyway, yes, let's move on to this topic from the Washington Post, who put this report together that you covered, Ian, about Meta burying research on child safety in Horizon Worlds.
Yeah, wow. So this was a very big, heavy report from the Washington Post. If you have any comments out there to share on this subject, let us know about your experience in Meta Horizon Worlds over the years. This report kind of refers to some of the time period before Meta's latest tools have come out to let you manage a family inside of VR. For context here, I've used these tools quite recently, and they're pretty interesting. It took me almost a day to get everything set up right with a previous account, get the passwords changed, and get everything logged in. But at the end of it, what I had was my phone now has a button. I think I can click on it to look in on the view of my child as they're experiencing VR in their own headset. So not only can my Horizon app show me my own view on the headset sitting right near, it can pop into my kids' view on their headset as they're experiencing VR wherever they are in the world. Haven't tested it too much, but theoretically that's the tools that are there. Then there's this research or this report from the Washington Post, very deep, where it was indicated that some folks from Meta took a very large trove of documents and gave them to Congress, indicating that Meta kind of really didn't want to look at some of these issues that we have all been complaining about. So I want to go look at the comments and see what people are talking about in their experience with Meta Horizon Worlds, because there's a lot of different things to unfold. You go read that article from the Washington Post. I bet it will echo a lot of the experiences I've seen already earlier in this episode, where I think I saw 2 or 3 comments, right, of people that just don't want to use Meta Horizon Worlds at all because of the screaming children, because of the interactions that are being forced upon them. And in this report from the Washington Post, you see indications that many years ago now, Meta basically knew that this was the experience and started doing things like having their meetings in private rooms instead of Horizon Central, where is the default meeting place. And I noticed Mighty Coconut is out there in our audience, and I had a whole bit of my story that we decided to cut out, but it talked about this idea that private room codes are the model for me for comfort in VR. There is no instance where I want a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old dumped into a lobby online where they're in voice chat with other people. The only instance I really want them in VR is with their view up on the TV so that I can help them with anything they're stuck on, or everyone else in the room can see what they're doing so that we can all have a social experience together in VR. It's very odd that Meta that this report indicates to me almost that Meta looked the other way in certain respects regarding what is happening with Horizon Worlds. And that's deeply disturbing to hear as a parent and or to see suggested. Now, Meta, of course, had its own response to this, and they pointed out their own perspective on safety, right? They, of course, have giant teams of people that are trying and dedicated to the safety of people online. But you also can see the sort of structures of the corporate entity there inside telling them they need to do certain things. This article outlined the interactions between lawyers at Meta and the research teams at Meta and the engineering teams at Meta trying to figure out how do we do this safely, and how you actually talk about it in public, how you talk about these safety initiatives internally, all got managed at some level by Meta, and it was really hard to read that document. So any comments we should respond to before we talk about this more, David?
Yeah, I think they, clearly prioritized the engagement that they got. They saw the children were using this, and that's, from their perspective, any restriction that they put on that would have then harmed the kind of engagement that they would see. We do want to point out that a lot of the occurrences in this article happened before they did roll out the parental controls in the preteen accounts. So, at the time that the article centers kind of on this interview that Meta researchers did with a parent, where the parent was unaware that her child of 10 years old, I think it was able to interact with these strangers online who were being inappropriate. But this was at the time when the headset was for 13 plus. So the headset was sold as a product for 13 plus. Technically, the child shouldn't be using it. So then obviously months after this and in the years after this, Meta has rolled out preteen accounts for parents for 10-year-old, 11 and 12. And so they are able to, on these preteen accounts, not get access to Horizon Worlds at all by default and have access to either all worlds rated for certain ages or approving worlds one by one. And I'm pretty sure you can also choose whether or not they have voice chat. And I'm pretty sure preteens can't voice chat at all, actually, in Horizon Worlds now. So a lot of this comes down to factors that occur with a lot of technology where parents are not really aware of the parental controls that technology has, whether it be on an iPad or an Xbox or a computer of any kind. And I think these companies need to make it a lot easier for parents to set up headsets and tablets and smartphones and consoles in a way that from the start has these parental controls. Because a lot of parents, right, you get that for Christmas, the kid goes and sets it up and they never, they put in a fake age, just like they've been trained to put on the internet for a long time. And then they kind of just set up the headset. But I think there probably are better ways from a user experience perspective, like a simple app UX way to say, hang on, is this person actually an adult or are they a child? And something you do, for example, is, at some point, if they want to purchase something, when they put in a credit card, the parent is the one typing in the credit card. Maybe have a pop up then. Stop 1 second. Is this a child? Because they've set themselves up as an adult. Click here to change this to a child account. There's all kinds of ideas. But of course, that comes back to the tension of, for Meta, do they want to do this? Because does this then harm their engagement if they make it more difficult for children to interact in Horizon Worlds? And that goes, it's the business versus morals issue that kind of gets in there. Ethics, sorry, that goes in there.
Yeah, so keep going. It's a much easier, better experience on the Apple ecosystem for parental control purchases night and day, actually. Yeah, I've been using those parental controls on Apple as well, but I will say that the view, like once you set up the Meta view sharing thing, it's kind of the critical component. And I'm seeing the other commenters here talking about just parents letting parents, when it comes to computers, just don't want to parent.
Yeah,
We
one
need to
thing I
talk
want
about
to push
that.
back on the Apple thing actually is that Apple commits one sin that makes it actually staggeringly difficult to have real parental controls, and that is that the iPad does not support multiple users. So a parent will hand a child an iPad that they have set up for themselves as an adult, and the child will use the app, and they could, if the parent walks out of the room, they get a call, something happens, they have to run away, that kid could just open Safari and start using it, because Apple wants you to buy every child in the house their own iPad. But that's not a financial practicality for most parents in the world. If you have an iPad per child, great, that's amazing. But a lot of people can't afford that and they share it. And I'm going to say this every time it's brought up, like, it is a huge child safety issue that Apple does not allow multiple accounts on the iPad. So let's, before we praise Apple, point that out.
Yeah, on the Apple TV, it actually prompts you right when you turn it on nowadays to select which user you are, and a long way around trying to get to what David's describing. And you've got a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and they don't know how to read their own name yet necessarily. Like, do they click on their own face? They click on the dinosaur's face? How does that work? And yeah, David's bringing up a huge, huge, huge issue. And gosh, I gotta go back to that thing of just parents don't want to parent. Um, uh, you're not taking care of your children if you let them off in VR on their own. Um, you're not. You need to have a view up nearby so you can see what they see. You need to help them on their journey. I talked about this. Someone else brought up the analogy of, if you wouldn't let your kid run around the mall on their own, why would you let them run around VR? And well, I mean, there's physical danger at the mall and only psychological danger online, right? Like, so there is different dangers present in both of those places, and the psychological danger online can transfer to real life if you're not teaching your kids the right ways to interact with others. Don't share personal information with strangers online. Those fundamental things. And like, you're letting kids go off into worlds where they don't know what they're looking at, where every object around them could have been construed to represent all sorts of subliminal messages that the kids don't yet understand about modern media or what they're doing. So the kids are suddenly dancing around in a world and learning a song that they discover. You hear them walking around the house humming a tune and singing some lyrics that they learned inside of virtual reality because you weren't looking in from that screen nearby. And we go back and forth on this a lot, David. I would love to hear you tease apart what you think is different about virtual reality media compared to flat screen media and its impact on children. What do parents out there need to understand about what's different about what kids are doing in headsets versus what they're doing on a flat screen computer?
I think the obvious one is the one that you pointed out, right? It is the fact that it's so obvious, but you can't see what they're doing, right? If your child is using an iPad, even though I'll continue my rant and, say that the fact that it's on Apple TV makes it even worse because they could do it. And, the thing I always bring up, just to continue the iPad rant very quickly, is that they literally do have a support for it in iPad OS, but it's gated to the enterprise and classroom system. So it's an intentional business decision by Apple. But coming back to Meta, it's the fact that you can't see what they're doing. So it does become, as you always discuss, how easily and quickly can you view what they're doing in the headset? And so you can do that through the mobile app, as you're pointing out. You can do it through webcasting. Ideally, you do it on the TV, but one of the challenges that we've actually been talking about internally is that there is no industry standard for casting. So Quest supports Google Cast. And if you have a TV that supports Google Cast, great. But if you don't, then you can't cast it to the TV easily. And that's not really Meta's fault. Apple doesn't. AirPlay is not an open standard. And Meta has actually said that they've asked Apple to support AirPlay, and Apple said no. Apple hates Meta, so they're not going to work with them for any reason. But these are real practicalities that need to be sorted out here. It needs to be as easy as possible. I think your approach, Ian, of just actually physically watching on a phone or a virtual screen on another device what your kids are doing is probably the best approach. But also, I think the fruit here is so low. Like my understanding of this, and I've spoken to teachers who guide parents through this, is that most parents just never set up the parental controls in the first place. If you're actually, as a parent, just bothering when your kid gets a new device to set up the parental controls, you're already ahead of 2/3 of other parents. And that's unfortunate to say, and I'm not trying to put the parents down. A lot of them just don't know about it. That's why it brings me back to my point that these tech companies need to make it as easy as possible from device setup to have parental controls from the start. I set up, new tech devices, and I don't think it's ever really asked me, are you a child? It's something that you have to kind of think about and kind of add as an ad hoc thing afterwards.
Yeah, there's so many interesting problems here. And I think it's interesting that the people in our comments are sort of divided over the mall, right? The mall was the place that kids in the 1980s, 1970s went to go hang out with their friends. It was a safe escape from your home life, right? You could get out for a whole afternoon and not have to follow the rules of your parents at the local mall. And, you could talk about whatever with your friends for as long as you possibly could. And some of our commenters, like Gigo, made a joke about it. What's a mall, right? And we have models I'm not the only person who's been an enthusiast for VR to have imagined a mixed reality paintball remake over their local mall, right? I would be amazing to turn your local mall into a giant game of paintball played by a whole bunch of people in headsets. But it's crazy to think of 30 years of just warning you that going outside and interacting with other humans is dangerous, right? Is actually affected a lot of people in thinking of just, where do I want to go and be around other people? You go to Central Park and you can people watch, and it's amazing to people watch. You just sit there for an hour or two and see every kind of person doing every kind of thing. And that's what a mall is for some people. You can go and do that too. And I don't know. I never have that. I don't know if I'll ever have that experience of just wanting to people watch inside of VR. it's hard for me to imagine going to a VR chat lobby and watching the slithering snakes doing their thing for 20 minutes and being entertained.
It depends what they're doing, right? If you're doing a performance or dance, I guess. But yeah, I understand your point. Coming back to the parental controls thing, a company I want to praise here, because we're being a bit negative and saying, this company's not doing that right. This company needs to do that better. A company I want to praise here is Amazon. Amazon is actually great about this because they sell tablet bundles that include their Fire tablet and a colorful case for kids that then come pre-set up in kind of child mode. So they are literally sold as like Amazon Fire for kids. They're not fundamentally different tablets. They're just the same tablet, but with a pre-installed colorful case that makes it so that the kid can throw the damn thing at a wall and it'll be fine. And then they have this like kid system that's set up from the start in the software. So why can't Meta sell a Quest 3 Kids edition that comes with, a big colorful silicon padding at the front that actually makes it a lot more drop resistant? Include, I don't know, some Gorilla Tag shiny rocks or something, and have it so that once you set that up, it starts as a preteen account from the start. That's something Meta could do tomorrow if it wanted. It's not that expensive to launch a new SKU, especially given how many kids are buying the damn headset in the first place. Quest 3S Kids Edition. If you're listening, Meta, build it. Make it so that parents can buy a headset, and from the get-go, it's already in kids mode.
Meta had a product called Portal that would have been absolutely amazing. That the moment a kid goes into VR, the portal says, would you like to activate the Quest's view right now? And you just hit button up on the portal device over there, and boom, the view from Quest is now mirrored and the kid is in VR. That's a whole product line that Meta killed. You can cast to web, you can cast to your phone. That's great. But what you just described on Amazon, right? I would love that if I bought an Amazon headset from Amazon, then the moment we pressed it on, the little Fire tablet right next door said, would you like to activate the view from the headset? And now I'm walking around the whole house with a tablet in my hand, watching what my kid is doing in VR. It's brilliant. And the fact that it was more important to the companies to own that view and send it to Meta servers than to make sure that view is in as many places as humanly possible is, I hate Apple, I hate Meta for not coming to an agreement on things like the Quest being able to display its view over AirPlay.
I mean, look, Meta claims that it has asked Apple and Apple has said no. I want to just point that out. One thing I would love to see happen in the tech industry when it comes to open standards, we've seen them actually work together with Matter on the smart home. And so that's really promising. The number one open standard that I want to see exist is casting. I want to see Google Cast and AirPlay both get deprecated as they're merged into industry open cast.
And you're describing Miracast. Miracast was the thing, and then it got forked into these things. And you're asking for it to be reforked.
Miracast was its own Microsoft-backed thing. It wasn't open. It was its own thing, and it had its really huge technical issues. I used Miracast. I've had devices that support both. The way in which Chromecast and AirPlay 2 work are technically a much better architecture. Look, if they want to I'll take it. If they want to get behind Miracast, great. I would rather have a bad solution that works on every device than none. But this goes way beyond VR, right? We were talking about how, you can't even cast to a Samsung TV using Google Cast because Samsung's rolled its own shitty casting system and everyone wants to roll their own. Well, I mean, look, there have been examples of the industry consolidating on things like this. Everyone but Apple has consolidated on an AirDrop competitor at this point,
Let me flip this around and describe
it's Apple. I just want to point out, sorry, just before you say it's Apple is the one that is holding AirPlay. It's not if every other company in the world could get AirPlay, they would do it tomorrow. It's Apple.
I just remember I'm standing there with Broadcom, and Broadcom's telling me about Miracast coming, and I'm asking about AirPlay, and they're pointing out like, oh yeah, Apple decided to do their own proprietary approach to this open standard, and like here we are 10 years later, and AirPlay is everywhere, and it's really, really useful. And both of you and I are saying the absolute same thing. I got a Chromatic in my kid's hand, He's sitting there in a chair right next to me playing Game Boy. And here I am working in my Apple Vision Pro headset. I'm doing my workday in my Apple Vision Pro headset. I'm talking to you. I've got Slack here. I've got someone in a FaceTime call with me over here. And because of the architecture of all this stuff, I can take the chromatic video out directly into my headset and have it over here in the right of my vision while I'm doing my whole workday. And I can say, oh, wow, you did great on level 1, son. Great job. All right. And then I go back to my workday and I keep working on from you. It's the same darn thing. And extend this to iPhone and video out and my absurdity that I'm going down that route there. If I hand my iPhone to my kid in order for them to play on it for a little while, I should be able to change the profile on the phone so that they don't get access to any of the bad stuff that they shouldn't on my phone. But then number 2, the phone should give me video out to the device nearby, and I shouldn't have to use AirPlay. It should just come over a wired connection to whatever headset I'm using. If my workday happens to be in a Quest, I should be able to get video out from that phone because it's in someone else's hands and I'm trying to help them while they're using my device in their hands, right? Like we're both saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Speed over making good decisions that are useful for your users.
I mean, like, this is for all of the great things that we'll always point out about Apple, for people who think we're biased, I promise you we're not. We're bringing up the good and the bad. A massive problem with Apple remains that they intentionally, and this is not a conspiracy theory, there have been, in a lot of these current antitrust cases, literally emails leaked from Apple executives where they say this explicitly. They choose proprietary standards to keep you locked into their ecosystem, even when they know that's not the best thing for users. They are doing it so that you buy an Apple product. It's the same reason that you don't get you don't get user accounts on iPad. They want you to buy 4 iPads.
So two comments here. I love that we've got Gigo and the creator of Virtual Desktop. Everyone thinks they can make a better streaming tech than the rest. I'm guilty of that. Didn't use any open standard because they all sucked. And then the other commenter here, Kid Blaze here, I just use Virtual Desktop to watch my kids play in VR. Meta streaming sucks. All right, I'm ready to move on to the next subject.
Yeah, I mean, look, supporting the open standard doesn't mean you can't have your own. You could have both. You could have the open standard and then have your own proprietary one. Nobody's saying they can't do that. It's that they don't do it in the first place, right? It's like you can't wirelessly cast your iPhone to a TV unless you either have one of the few models with AirPlay or go and get an Apple TV box. It's a bit like these are things that harm not just other people; they actually harm Apple's own users. So I don't know. I think the casting issue has been just frustrating for the past 15 years, and there's always these esoteric advantages of these closed standards until there isn't, right? Until Apple supports Matter as they do now, right? So for the smart home, it's fine. All of these amazing theoretical ideas. Why is it fine for the smart home? Because Apple never had a large market share in the smart home, so it's advantageous for them to support the companies like Alexa and Google Assistant that do have a large market share. It's entirely a business decision. I just want to for anyone technically justifying it. No, it's a business decision.
Let me just close this out by saying to everyone out there at Meta, at Apple, at any other companies that get serious about shipping hardware, Google, make it easier for a parent and a child to share their views with one another while they're inside of a headset. Just if it's a competition thing with you and your competition, find the person on the other team that you need to make this an easier thing, because you're talking about people's safety here. You're talking about children's safety being kept out of view of their parents by these devices not sharing what they're doing with one another.
I just want to reiterate again. So we have 2 more topics, but just to end, I just want to reiterate, according to Meta, they could be lying, but according to Meta, they explicitly asked Apple for AirPlay support for Quest, and Apple said no. So
sure, here, imagine it's a resolution thing. Like, okay, Apple will approve it up to 1080p and 60 frames per second.
It's not, though. It's that they hate Meta.
can the same AirPlay technology be used to do what Virtual Desktop does?
Can you? I mean, yeah, you can
overlay Steam VR at
Oh,
8K.
Steam VR. I thought you were talking about just the regular flat screen one. You can use
No,
it
I'm talking about going up in resolution and stereoscopically overlaying
No, AirPlay does
Horizon
not
worlds on top of your Apple Vision Pro experience.
No, it doesn't support VR. They have Mac remote rendering now coming in Vision OS 26, but they don't have AirPlay. It's not AirPlay, but it's still Apple proprietary technology. But what's the question?
Well, it's just if they open up AirPlay at certain resolutions and certain frame rates, then they're allowing Horizon to do an overlay on top of the Horizon OS experience the same way Steam VR overlays on top of the Vision OS experience. And
I'm not sure I follow. I don't really get what you're saying.
Link look like if it's shipped for Vision Pro?
Oh, you're saying like
what would a MetaLink app do if it was on Vision Pro?
They could make a app tomorrow. There's no one stopping you from doing that on Vision Pro. That's not the issue.
And if I wanted to play this app on my Vision Pro,
well, this is an Android app, so you can't do that. But if you're talking about a PC VR app,
the PC version, the PC version of this,
that's ALVR. You could do that. Meta could release, they could fork ALVR and release it tomorrow, but they don't want to. For all
that's ultimately is my argument why they would say no to, is they don't want to. That's the end limit of letting Meta stream way.
But they do. ALVR was approved on the store. It's got nothing to do with this. It's that Apple doesn't want to let them do it because they hate Meta and they don't want to support them in any way. It's really it's not any more complicated than that. I promise you. It's been widely reported. I've read the emails.
Hate is described. It's data.
No, I've read the emails. They genuinely detest Meta. Like, you can go and read the leaked emails.
Because why? It's like, why did the North hate the South? Why did the South hate the North? Right? Like, different policies and stuff.
Sure, where they got to there and why they hate Meta, sure. But again, it's not like there's no terms which Apple would be like, oh yeah, well, you can use AirPlay as long as you stick to 1080p 30f. No, like it's a no.
All right, well, that's what I need as a user. I need 30 FPS, 1080p of every device that my child is using, streamed to nearby devices so that I can help them with their learning.
I agree with you. I'm just saying the company you need to ask is Apple. That's all I'm saying.
I know. Well, Apple, do it. All right, come on. It's past time.
Yeah. Okay. We have two more topics here, folks. We're going to talk about Horizon Worlds AI NPCs, and then we'll talk about our expectations for Connect. So the AI NPCs in Horizon Worlds have been teased for really a year now. At Connect 2024, we saw this demo. You can go in to Bobber Bay, this world, and try it right now if you're in the US. So the news here is that now any creator can add these scriptable conversational AI NPCs to their world, but only users in the US can actually talk to them. So they are powered by Meta's Llama 4 large language model. They can be used for storytelling, context-aware guides, for social immersion. When you set up each NPC, you give them a name, a backstory, instructions, and guardrails. You then choose their voice in between dozens of different synthetic voices, and you adjust things like the speed and pitch, so each has a unique voice. When it comes to actually kind of integrating them, a lot of this is using TypeScript. So if you're not familiar, the Horizon desktop editor, a lot of the functionality that you actually add to your world is programmed through TypeScript, an offscript of JavaScript. So with TypeScript, you can integrate these NPCs into the gameplay of your world. You can give them background context of the world state. It could be like something like the current weather or something, as well as dynamic in the moment knowledge of events, such as the player picking something up, a door opening, or any other happening. And these NPCs can then be prompted to react to this. All of this gets put into their kind of world state knowledge. You can also use elicitations. So this is an API where you get them to speak naturally by telling them their motivation. So for example, your elicitation would be, and this is just something like, npc.elicit, and then give them the string. If you give them the string, the laser blast pierced your armor and you're in terrible pain, the NPC might say out loud, I'm hurt badly, stay here, and you can hold them off depending on what else had happened. So these are NPCs that, by using this TypeScript API, have knowledge of the gameplay dynamics that you've set up through TypeScript in general. For users outside the US or below the age of 18, because actually the two requirements here is they have to be in the US and over 18 for their account at least. There is a API check for availability, so you can implement a fallback. And an example of a fallback here is that you can actually just tell them exactly what to say, and that's available worldwide. So there's an API that is literally just like npc.sayoutloud or whatever it is, and then they just text to speech, right? They say in the voice that you set up for them the exact words. So, I played around a little bit with this last night. I was actually quite fascinated. I obviously couldn't use it because I'm not in the US, but I was just playing around with the APIs and seeing what's possible, and playing around with the fallback. Pretty cool. Later this year, Meta says that it will also add the ability for these AI NPCs to trigger in-world actions to make them active participants in the virtual world. So right now, these are conversational AI NPCs. You can do your own, setting them up as regular game NPCs using like pathfinding and stuff. You've been able to do that for months and months and months. That's not conversational, just, whatever you script them to do, like you would any NPC you're doing in any video game. But in terms of actually allowing the LLM to then trigger in-world actions based on what's conversationally happening and what is being prompted into their context, that is coming later this year to make them more dynamic parts of the world. So interesting stuff. Still conversational, still very early, but I'll kind of go over my normal recap I do on this show when it comes to like AI NPCs in general. So there is enormous potential in AI NPCs. And I'm not talking about Horizon Worlds here. I'm talking about across the entire interactive media and gaming industry. Enormous potential for them to revolutionize gaming, to introduce entirely new genres and revive genres that don't really work. So the example I always bring up, because I like it and because it's a big theme of the Star Trek holodeck, is a murder mystery where instead of pressing X to doubt and choosing between three choices, you have natural conversations with the suspects, and you are Poirot or whatever your favorite detective is, and you go around and figure out whose story doesn't add up based on the clues that you've seen by exploring the mansion, right? You could have an amazing game that gives you so many hours of gameplay that's just in one room, even by talking to people. But of course, you can make it a lot more than that. You can arrive at the mansion and go around with your magnifying glass and combine the clues with what you hear from people. Enormous potential for entirely new genres of video game. But the problem is economics. So right now, to get high quality responses, these LLMs, large language models, need to run on cloud GPUs. And so that means there's a cost involved. And that cost is either eaten by a large corporation like Meta or by VCs that are backing a small company. In this case, it's obviously Meta eating the cost, or passed on to the user. So in something like Rec Room, where they have the little roomy AI buddy, that's gated behind Rec Room Plus. There are other games and mods, like for Skyrim, where you literally put in your own OpenAI API key, or your Gemini API key, whatever the hell you want to use. And so then you're literally paying per token. So every conversation you're having with an AI NPC is actually costing you money. That's obviously not practical. It would feel very different to play Skyrim, knowing that every conversation you have costs you money. And my detective game example as well, you would want to. It wouldn't feel comfy to know that every word is costing you money, right? That's not going to work. So you get this one possibility of subsidized NPCs like we see today. That's what we're seeing from all, these companies. The other possibility, of course, is on-device models. Two problems with that. One is that they're quite slow and not as capable. Obviously, that will improve over time. The other is that their inference is taking away from the gameplay compute. So you either have to make a game that has lower graphical fidelity and such, which is a nightmare for VR, right? We're already struggling with graphical fidelity. You don't want to give it away, or even worse, every time you speak to an NPC, you don't want the world to start stuttering and juddering because your GPU is doing local model inference. So this is a massive problem, right? Like, how do you get AI NPCs? Either you pay for it, a company subsidizes it, or you run it on device with all the problems I just brought up. In the long term, what I expect to happen is that mobile chipsets and the APUs that go into gaming consoles will get more and more fixed function hardware on the chip to do AI inference. And, I would imagine maybe even literally an entirely dedicated chip. Maybe you literally see, the PlayStation 6, complete speculation on my part, I have no internal knowledge. Maybe you see the PlayStation 6 has a literal entire separate GPU just for AI inference, and then you can do the rendering on the regular GPU. There's all kinds of potential solutions here. But in the meantime, we're going to see AI NPCs. The main ones you're going to interact with are going to be the ones that are subsidized by corporations or VCs, such as this. Every time you speak to any of these NPCs, it is costing Meta money, but you as the user are not paying that.
Wait. That's such a fun opportunity for wasting Meta's money, right? Like setting up a voice recorder just speaking like what is it in the movie Last Action Hero, when Arnold Schwarzenegger gets a call from his ex-wife and he just takes the phone and takes a voice recorder of him saying, yeah. Oh, okay. And he puts them together and he puts them down on the table. Yeah, I've done an interaction in Stellar Cafe with an AI, and I was talking to Henry Stockdale, one of our writers, about his interactions with AI, and you, David, also pointed out that it was not going to feel good for a while, right? Like these are going to be, like these are proofs of concepts. Like how would you, like I don't know that I'm going to want to play a whole game interacting with these types of NPCs.
I think you will soon, but it does come down to the economics, right? Today, if you were to throw the most expensive speech synthesis and LLM models at this problem, you could get a pretty damn good concept, right? Like if you've talked to ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, for example, it can feel strikingly natural. If you haven't in the audience, I don't know if it's still gated behind the plus. Maybe you do get some minutes on it with the free one. Go and figure out which it is and talk to the ChatGPT advanced mode as it is today. It feels a lot like talking to a human being, which is striking. Gemini Live is close. Then some of the other models are a little bit more distant. But I think we're going to get there. I think it's just going to be like who pays for it is the issue. It's not like I don't know what their plan is here for Stellar Cafe. Have they said yet or what their kind of monetization strategy is going to be here? I don't know if they have announced that yet. I haven't been following it.
No, there was just a coming soon, and they were planning to release it this year. I assume there's a price on it. The comment from Devin was they wish they had known all the problems before they had even tried, because it essentially turned out to be a bigger, more difficult thing that they originally looked at. All the different ways that people can speak or ask a question. But I'm just talking like there's this idea of a gameplay loop, this idea of getting a person into, I don't know, just a loop where they feel good playing and keeping and coming back, right? You go and fetch something, you get a little good feeling at the end of the quest, and you keep the person going. This idea of a gameplay loop. And when you interact in a game like Mass Effect, you get these 4 dialogue options that people have written, and you go through these 3 options, and you have a moment of pause where you think, which is the right choice for me? And you take them. It's a turn-based interaction now, right? I'm actually pondering what my future in this world is going to be like. This is such a different thing of walking up to a person and going, you have to assess what are they capable of doing for me, right? What do I need them to do for me? What is my task here in this world? The whole flow of what is a game loop changes the moment you throw these things in there.
Yeah, I mean, you were disconnected for a while there, but the one that I always talk about, my kind of North Star for these AI NPCs is a murder mystery. So the audience will have heard me say, you show up at a house or a mansion or some sort of scenic villa or whatever, you're Poirot-style detective, you go around and talk to people, and you freely walk around the home and use your magnifying glass, and you figure out whose story disagrees, which holes are in which story. That's the game I want to play. It was always there in Star Trek and the holodeck, for example. Yet when it comes to these conversational AI NPCs, I'm seeing people bring up Sesame, which was appointed by a ex-Oculus person and saying that that's the best voice AI. Yeah, Sesame's great, and I tried it when it first came out. But ChatGPT's advanced voice mode in the past like 2 months or so has been updated with what I think seems to be very, very similar technology. It does seem to do that same thing of reacting to your kind of emotional state. So if you tried ChatGPT's voice mode a year ago, it's completely different. If you tried it 6 months ago, it's a really recurring theme on this show. We almost have to say when we talk about which AI model we tried and on exactly which date did you try it, because these companies make silent upgrades. Google, for example, Gemini 2.5 Pro. The irony is they give them these really specific numbers like 2.5, but they've actually updated Gemini 2.5 Pro so many times that it's a dramatically better model than when it launched. So if you say like, have you tried Gemini 2.5 Pro? You really have to say like which timestamp. The one thing I really want from these AI companies is please use version numbers. Please, if you update it, Gemini 2.51, Gemini 2.52, please, because it's so difficult to have conversations about these without saying like which version did you try, and you really have to say what date did you try it on.
I love, who is it? Davin out there says they've got 4 Connect V1s and 2 Connect V2s, and they're reminiscing with James out there, saying that at Mass Effect 3, you could read the lines out loud to have it select the line choices. What a fascinating thing. And that brings me straight to the her depictions of how you do this to make your characters walk inside the game over there. But I love these comments. The 4 Connect V1s, I love that. It was so right. Think about what that was. There was a period where Microsoft said, "This is the fastest selling consumer hardware in human history." Like there's a press release out there somewhere digging around where they said that they went out and made that press push. Where the Kinect is so well, so well adopted. It's amazing. And there were people like Davin out there and myself, right? I played Elmo, right? It was so neat to like wave at Elmo and have different things happen. But sometimes when you waved at Elmo, it wouldn't see the hand wave. And like it was broken fundamentally because of all these failed things. And it's hard for me not to feel that about AI right now, at least in voice prompting.
I'm gonna say go and try ChatGPT voice mode. Voice mode.
I believe it works with individual prompts, but it's over the course of a 3-minute conversation. I see it falling apart.
Well, I'm saying go and have a 3-minute conversation with ChatGPT advanced voice mode. It's shocking how good these things get. It's such a theme in this show that the pace of advancement is literally month by month. That's the issue here.
Fair.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you though that there are awkwardness. I read your hands on with this, and people should go and read that. It's linked in the article that's talking about Horizon AI PCs. At the bottom, I link Ian's hands off with Stellar Cafe. A lot of this does come down as well to prompt design as well, and maybe game design. Maybe we need something that's a hybrid between, the 3 choices that you get in Skyrim or Mass Effect versus complete freedom. Maybe you need to have like some sort of like thought bubbles pop out of the NPC's head that give you, ideas of topics and things like that, and hints and things like that. Because it can be a bit awkward to just go from scratch in a new world. I think there's gonna be the solution is somewhere between a free-form conversation and 3 options that you choose between.
What I'd like is something like Pistol Whip with a side seat, with a wisecracking side seat. And like maybe we could interact or do something and we could talk to each other. But I want cool gameplay that's not necessarily tied to the person here, to this AI NPC. Do we have one more subject here? Because I wanted to talk about Invisible Hours real quick. Do you remember the Invisible Hours? Did you ever play that one?
Yes, I like that game for sure. I do want to say time-wise, we probably do want to get into our last topic though. Yeah.
Well, I would love, so I just wanted to bring that up. We'll talk about it more on VR Sideload, but the creator of the Invisible Hours, if you've ever played that game, bought the rights back to the game. They went out in this year, 2025, and bought the rights to a PC VR game from the early days, a well-loved PC VR game, and a game that would be really interesting to see imagined. The murder mystery idea of AI NPCs done really well. So hopefully the guy who's got that project gets a good amount of funding behind him to go and re-realize and re-release that project. But I wanted to bring that up before we talked about this last subject.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to have the invisible hours, but I'm speaking to them. I feel like there is going to be like a chat GPT moment where we do play a game that does you do this right. I think it's going to be hard for developers to get it right. It's going to require entirely new skills, but I think there will be a moment when you feel like Sherlock Holmes and it all comes together. And I can't wait. I think the future of gaming is really, really bright. I think of what interactive stories meant on the Star Trek holodeck and what our games are today. And even if you're an anti-AI person, you realize that you can't get these characters any other way.
Go,
The holodeck wasn't about being in places; it was about the characters.
go watch the game with Michael Douglas from the 1990s and watch the interactions he has with other people who don't want to spoil the game for him but have experienced it before, and the way they talk about the game, they're like, it's going to change your life. And what David's describing there, the moment you go and do that murder mystery properly done inside of holodeck mechanics, where you've given it all the right things, and the AI NPCs work really well, and gosh, you actually go to the holodeck wearing the hat and the outfit, so you feel a little bit more like you're the old character, right? All right.
And as James O'Loughlin said, just don't program Moriarty to be smarter than Data. Yeah, you don't want to. We got to keep Moriarty not that challenging.
Yep.
I wonder.
I know what the secret prompt is. Make an opponent that can defeat me. Right?
Yeah,
Don't say that. You're not allowed to say that to the AI. Okay, you're screwed if you say that.
I feel like there's going to be a strange moment where obviously we've all been frustrated at video game bosses or enemies before because we can't beat them in combat. But I feel like there's going to be a really strange moment when we have like an emotional human reaction to the way an AI NPC is like bettering us in conversation, or the moment where you do feel that Moriarty enemy. That's going to be a weird first moment.
Well, I had a glimpse of it, and I went into this. I mean, I'm glad you've dragged us back to the previous subject. The Stellar Cafe write-up, you go read up. I tried to not make my experience seem positive or negative about it. I tried to write around and be neutral about it because, number one, Stellar Cafe isn't out there yet. You're pointing out the pace of progress. They can improve those things overnight. They can also improve the onboarding I experienced so that I knew what I was getting into a little bit better with these bots. But there's a moment where I'm sitting down there with a bot, and I've got a human in one ear, the creator of the game, on a computer in front of me, but in my AirPod in left ear. And I've got the bot in VR, just like David is right here across from me. And I'm trying to figure out what the bot wants from me. I'm trying to figure out what the gameplay is in this game by talking to a bot across from me. And the human in my ear has to kind of actually help me and say, oh, yeah, this bot is trying to record a podcast. And I go, oh, okay, now I understand. Okay, so you're trying to record a podcast here. And then the bot put out its podcast recorder, like a whole animation was activated where the mic came out, and I was like, oh, now I'm a podcast guest to an AI. And I had that flash that you just described of, oh, shoot, I just got turned into a role player in this bot's role play. I'm playing inside its universe, and now my opinions on robots are actually the subject of this robot's interview with me. And I shut down the interview, go describe it, where it's like, I'm laughing. I'm literally laughing there going, that got real awkward real fast. But I felt this glimpse of gameplay I've never ever touched before, and it would be amazing to see expanded out and done well.
It's so interesting to hear. Yeah, I really do have the feeling that we're on the cusp of a dramatically new type of interactive experience that is somewhere between movie and game. And I'm not an AI hype bro. I'm just saying that it's real. The technology is real. Yeah, we'll see where this goes in coming years. Our final topic is our predictions and expectations for MetaConnect 2025. And this year, I think we're a lot less certain about what we're going to see than in any year before. A lot of years before, we could pretty much tell you everything that was going to be majorly announced at Connect. We got pretty damn close in a lot of our predictions. This year, it's a lot harder to know. One thing I think we can say with high confidence is that those HUD glasses with the SEMG wristband will be announced, if not launched, at Connect. By launched, I mean open pre-orders for shipping next month, as Meta does with its products. So there's been just so many rumors about this now, so many sources pointing towards the same thing. I would be shocked if we go through Meta Connect 2025 and this doesn't happen, right? Like something will have gone very wrong inside Meta if we don't see the Hypernova glasses, as they are codenamed, arriving here. So, just for a really, really quick recap for what we expect this to be, as we were talking about earlier, with HUD glasses, a small fixed display in the right eye that you look down to get things like phone notifications, the time, weather, turn-by-turn navigations, text from the AI, contextual information in a small area in one eye, not augmented reality. And we expect that this wristband will be included in the box, that you can use gestures like swiping your thumb against your index finger as a virtual D-pad, twisting with your finger like this for things like volume, as well as kind of swipes through the air that allow you to kind of do all the kind of custom gestures that we're not sure yet. In one hand, though, we're not talking about two-handed interactions. The reports indicate that this is going to be $800 and that this will be the primary focus of Meta Connect. From here, it's difficult to know what else. One thing on the Quest side I think we'll see is Meta has been refocusing its Horizon OS operating system around virtual screens since pretty much the reveal of Apple Vision Pro. Now, of course, Andrew Bosworth will tell you that they've been working on it since before that. I don't disbelieve him, but it's clear that the priorities there have changed since Vision Pro. But one thing that they don't have, that Ian often rightly brings up, is the ability to share those screens. So they have a story for virtual screens as a single user, but not about multiplayer. Today, multiplayer on Quest, other than if you're using something like the big screen app, or you're using the implementation of screen sharing in YouTube specifically, it is a single user experience. And I think what we have started to see with that new Quest Home update that's rolling out in PTC is that we will probably see, and this is a guess, where this is prediction time. We're not saying we have insider knowledge of any kind. We do not, I promise you, this is prediction time. Screen sharing as a system level feature in Horizon OS in the same way that SharePlay is a system level feature in Vision OS. So that would be my prediction for kind of what the main thing we might see for Horizon OS on Quest.
Oh, wow. So I saw there was a comment here saying, what was it? They wanted something on Quest 3. Arlen, I want to hear that those wristbands will work with the Quest 3. And I'm there with you, Arlen. I went face to face with Mark Zuckerberg. I think it's 3 years now. And I asked him about the use cases of those bands with VR, and he immediately reframed it around, oh, but they're big for AR. And yeah, I want a pair of them, right, for our Wolverine things. And I don't know if they're going to keep that for future hardware or not.
It's not that they have no use for VR, but it's clear that they have a lot more use for AR and HUD glasses, right? Because you can't do optical hand tracking when it comes to glasses that have a tiny battery and a very low compute, right? So it's a massive advantage to be able to do in a couple of milliwatts to be able to do precise finger tracking and then get haptics. Whereas, if you need haptics today, you can pick up a touch controller. So I'm trying to kind of say what I think will happen. Do I want it to support Quest? Of course. Will it eventually? Probably. Will it at launch? Probably not, in terms of expectations. So I see Steve Barr saying that they hope that there's an SDK for the glasses that isn't just AI prompting. That is another thing that we strongly expect to see at Meta Connect. We have put out an article that we talked about last week that there are strong indications that there will be some kind of SDK. What that SDK will be, we have no idea. It could be on device, it could be server side, it could be some combination. We simply do not know. It could be even on the phone, like with some of the stuff Brilliant Labs are doing with their Halo Brilliant SDK. That's really difficult to know. I think the biggest question I've seen from our audience around MetaConnect is, will we see third-party Horizon OS headsets from the likes of Asus, ROG, and Lenovo? And that is another giant I don't know. Usually, we are pretty good at being able to say, I'm sorry to say, I understand you want us to be able to say yeah or no. There is no indication that they will and no indication that they won't. The only thing I will say is Andrew Bosworth has hinted that it would be for those companies to announce. So on the balance, I would say it's more likely that Asus announced the ROG headset at a Asus event than Meta event, but we don't know.
But Bosworth said, Meta executives said the same thing about Grand Theft Auto.
Well, they announced. Oh, sorry, as in to ask the Grand Theft
Auto. You're going to need to hear from Rockstar what their next steps are. That was their go-to line for Grand Theft Auto after a while.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think for new hardware, though, there's a much stronger argument, right? But it's hard to know.
Geek Odin's comment. So they copied virtual desktop, so now they want to copy big screen. Got it. Nothing really changes. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Geek Odin has been building a competing product for the core idea of what Meta has pursued for a very long time, right? They've had it built into the PC system, and then big screen, right? It's amazing to see that virtual desktop and big screen were competitors with each other for a very long time, except they each looked at each other and said, we're going to do this a slightly different way. And big screen focused on co-watching, and virtual desktop focused on being an incredible utility that does a lot of other things that big screen doesn't. But ultimately, they are all going after the same thing. And I just want to throw out, on Quest systems, you've got the HDMI Link app, which is a misnomer now, because you can bring UVC video into the HDMI Link app in order to watch that stuff in, whatever's in your hand, a chromatic, like I've said, inside the software. But critically, Meta didn't put any hardware level decoding for HDMI or UVC or DisplayPort on any Quest system whatsoever, right? So where I'm going with that is, can they deplatform a video source?
Okay, so firstly, I want to respond to Guy Godin's comment. We brought it up. Let's each respond to it. I don't think they're copying Big Screen here. Big Screen is an app that you can go into and share, YouTube and share Plex and share your PC screen. This is the regular 2D windows you have in your Quest home environment being shared. If anything, they're copying Apple's SharePlay idea. Apple was first to do this with SharePlay on Vision Pro. But this would be any Android app. So how the DRM works there would be down to the particular app, in the same way that you can't screen share or screenshot particular Android apps. When it comes to MetaQuest HDMI link, that's a great question. Will they allow sharing for this? When it comes to the technical details of Quest HDMI link, the app, it is a bit of a misnomer. It's not that they don't support UVC in. It's that's what the only thing they support. It's that they don't actually have HDMI or DisplayPort in. They don't have a physical chip. They would have to add an extra chip to take in HDMI or DisplayPort source, and they don't have that. So the reason you have to use a capture card, the capture card is that chip. It takes HDMI and compresses it down into a UVC video source that can then go in. That's why the capture card's there. If they had that extra chip, they would be able to do it without it. And maybe they see it on future hardware.
Look, back to my core question there is, can they deplatform a video source? Should it choose, should they decide? What do you mean by
source? So the HDMI thing, I think already they don't allow DRM'd HDMI content, right? So the answer, what do you mean by source?
What if they found that a particular type of hardware was being used to port in copywritten material with the DRM stripped off, and now it's being used on that platform? Do they deactivate Quest headsets from being able to connect to that type of device?
It's a good question. So let's not be hypothetical about this. There are Chinese companies that will sell you capture cards that intentionally bypass DRM, and you can go and we do not endorse that. But as journalists, we absolutely are within our rights to report on the existence of that, which is what we are doing in this sentence. We are not endorsing it. We're reporting on the existence of it. There are Chinese capture cards that let you do this. Meta is not going to probably. I think this is going to be a look the other way thing. Now, if a giant company like, I don't know, Disney sent Meta a threatening letter saying, we are aware that millions of Quest owners are doing this, we would like you to take reasonable steps to stop this. Would they? Yes. Are millions of Quest users going to do this? No, most don't even know about it. And most people are not using HDMI link, right? They're just going to use the built-in Netflix and, Disney Plus capabilities and things like that. I think a lot of this will probably be look the other way. There's a lot of patterns in tech where these companies look the other way until the content holders come to them. Sorry.
James and I wanted to watch Alien Earth together the other night, and we're both subscribers to services that should allow us to watch that together, except I subscribe to Disney Plus with Hulu as a service that provides it through it, and then James subscribes to Alien Earth through some other method, and we could not arrive in the same app together in order to co-watch Alien Earth at the best quality imaginable. We watched Alien Earth together that day. We figured out a way, but it wasn't the quality we should have watched it in. It wasn't what we're discussing Meta trying to do next, week or whatever. And at the end of the day, you talked about not endorsing what Chinese capture cards are doing. If I had a copy of The Wizard of Oz from 1938 on a drive, there should be nothing technologically standing between me and three others watching it on a 70-inch screen wherever we damn well please, just by porting in a single source into 4 headsets like I've been discussing. So,
I think,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we always disagree on is you're talking about, like, why would you, the cables, I would do it wirelessly. There should be nothing stopping you doing it wirelessly as well.
I mean, there is, but yes, the police, the DRM police.
Oh,
but
sorry,
whatever.
I thought you were saying that is Wizard of Oz. How many years is it? 100? It's 100 years actually, isn't it? That it takes for
it's like
things
70
to be,
or 105. It depends on the copyright, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were bringing it up as an example of something that is public domain at this point.
No, I did mean to go with public domain. You're right about wireless making it easier. I'm saying that. Oh, I get what you're saying.
I'm saying, look, if something was public domain, right? All you need to do is download that. If screen sharing does come to Horizon OS, all you need to do is open that in the video player and hit share. But do I expect it to support DRM services? No. That's a huge issue.
Let me reframe this another way. Like, I need to be able to get this across. It's illegal to do this, right?
To do what?
To rip DRM off of a movie and to distribute it without the rights holders' permissions.
Yes, of course it is. Yes.
All right. And 2 humans can sit next to one another and want to watch a movie on their head-mounted displays, and they have to break the law in order to do it. I'm saying again that is wrong. And you're actually shaping human experience in really messed up ways in order to stop 2 humans sitting next to one another from sharing the same content.
I agree with you very much so. Exactly. I think the analogy I made back in the past when we discussed this was, if you invite a friend over to your house to watch Disney Plus and they don't have a Disney Plus subscription, Mickey Mouse doesn't bust through the window and, start beating your friend up and taking him off to DRM prison. The issue is, in fairness to these companies, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, the issue is that you can't have 1 million people in your house. But if you make it completely technologically possible to share from 1 to 1, there's not that much technical difference to sharing 1 to 1 million. And that's the issue. That's why DRM exists. I don't think these companies do much care if it's just you and a friend. like on a giant on a scale at scale. I don't think
Oh
that's
yeah, no, you're nailing it, right? Like we're talking about the bar crawls, right? We're talking about like you're talking about. I remember going to a bar in Orange County, California, and everyone was gathered there for the StarCraft finals of some event. And Mike Morhaime, the CEO of Blizzard, walks in and sits down at the back of the crew, and of this audience of people gathered to play his game. And I don't think anyone else noticed that Mike Morhaime, the CEO of Blizzard Entertainment, just walked in, but I did as the reporter, and I'm watching him experience a social phenomenon with people playing his game, right? He's gathered in a public place with a whole bunch of gamers to experience video gaming at its finest. And I'm describing being kept from doing that by watching a movie with your friends. It's all right. Yeah, I
yeah.
appreciate all the comments, everyone understanding exactly what we're getting to. Anything you want to talk about before we close out today? Thank you for the long chat today, David.
Yeah, I mean, I guess look on the Connect 2025 thing for the screen sharing, it will be interesting to see how Meta does navigate this DRM. You know, with Apple, in theory, if you're both subscribers of Disney Plus, you can watch content together. I understand you've run into an edge case there, but in general, in theory, it should work. You know, I think the Alien Earth is done through like Hulu, which or Star or whatever it is that kind of runs into this edge case. But it should be the case. I agree that if you are even if one person owns a movie, you should be able to watch it together. The issue is just how that technologically gets implemented. Dare I say, the solution here that would make it a lot more appealing to these companies like Disney and Hulu and Netflix would be an industry standard that makes it easy to do it rather than share play and meta share or whatever the hell they're going to call it. And, you know, Google share or whatever Google ends up calling on an Android XR. Dare I say that what we need here, because if you're a company, it's all about how much time it takes to implement this from a cost perspective. So
Yeah.
one other thing I want to bring up for Connect, just to get back onto this Connect thing, is I see some people asking, do we think there's going to be, not my area of expertise, but they're asking, do we think there's going to be a surprise game announcement, right? A giant blockbuster. I am not the games person, so I'm just going to give my layman view here with that disclaimer. But I think I think Deadpool is that game. Like it's the big blockbuster, and they've already announced it. They do seem to actually detach the announcement of their games now. They do it during these summer game fests and traditional games rather than Connect. So I think in the same way that last year's was Batman Arkham Shadow, and it got announced also in summer, didn't it? If I recall correctly, this year I would be shocked to see any blockbuster. Now that doesn't mean we won't see game announcements. We probably will, but I don't think we're going to see. I don't think Deadpool is going to be outshadowed by any game announced to Connect.
So, Jack, just how can Ian reconcile his stances of people in public demanding they never be recorded on the download, but an intellectual property could be and should be snuck around? I appreciate that. I'm going to point out as just, there's going to be conflicts in a lot of my positions or the things that I bring up because I'm trying to get everyone to think about those subjects. So, for example, in answer to your question, why do we have more cameras than public restrooms? Why do we have more cameras than beds for people to access for free? Right? Those are the types of things that I'm throwing out there and trying to bring or illuminate in these discussions is what is the overall direction of everything we're doing, and are we filling in the gaps with, if we're tearing down society with one new technology, what are we doing to build back society up with new technologies at the same time? I see Kay Guillory out there in our audience watching us from Resonite. So out there in VR watching us, thank you for tuning in out there.
My headset is very much so about to die. I can feel it dying. So I'm going to quickly. I think there are some people that do want us to just take a stab in the dark guess as about the Asus Horizon OS headset, because with our report earlier this year about the cancellation of the 2026 candidates for Quest 4, that's a lot of core VR gamers kind of hope for their next headset. And so I'm going to do it, but I'm going to put the giant disclaimer that this is an absolute guess. My guess is no. My guess is that the Asus headset will come out in 2026 and basically the same timeline as the next ultralight headset, and the where we would have seen the Quest 4, I think the Asus headset is going to slip in 2026, and I think it will use the next generation chipset, right? The XR2 Gen 3. That is a guess. I want to be clear that's a guess. I'm going to say again, that is a guess. I don't think we're going to see the Asus headset at this.
Yeah,
Connect.
my one prediction here before we close out would be I do think they would name a title that would come deep into the future, like one thing that they've dropped a lot of money on, maybe a partner like EA or something like. We've partnered with EA and this game is coming in the future to our platform. What I would hate on that though is repeat if that happens is repeat history back to Grand Theft Auto, right? Where they did that essentially to Grand Theft Auto, and they did it to such an extent that they came out and said that it's coming to Quest without saying which generation of Quest it would launch on, if I recall.
I think they said Quest 2 from what I remember.
We've debated this in the past, but we don't have time for getting into that. But yeah, I would expect one big game. And the thing is, I would expect it to be like everyone, after they announced the game, to go, wait, they didn't say it would run on Quest 3, did they? Like, because I wouldn't expect it to run on Quest 3.
We'll see. I'm just wondering if there's any other things we should say before my headset dies and close out here about Connect, what we expect.
What else, David? So let's give your travel plans. Tell them when you're traveling.
Sure. Yeah, I'm traveling on Tuesday and should be there for both Wednesday and Thursday, and then I'm traveling back. So it's going to be a big day. It's Meta has disclosed that on their Public Connect website that the keynote is at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So that's going to be an interesting timing in terms of jet lag, because that's obviously midnight UK time. So my brain is going to be all over the place, but I'm going to be caffeinated to the gills, folks. I'm going to be the most caffeinated man in California, but it will work. And we're going to bring you as much coverage as possible. This weekend, I'll be getting some serious rest, getting ready to push myself to the limit next week.
Yep, it's going to be a crazy week for us. Have some patience for us. David's going to be very stressed out of his mind out there all on his own in California. They left us one spot to get there out to MetaConnect. So David is going to take that. I hope you get to see Mark Zuckerberg or Andrew Bosworth and ask some questions face to face. Please ask for that to be on the record and record if you do. Of course, they may say no to that, so I won't have my expectations. And gosh, even getting to go face to face to them was a big ask, but I think our audience needs to hear. I would love to hear from Meta. Like we just talked about all their big things. I want to hear it from their voices about their long-term plans for VR. What was that comment?
D1360 VR is bringing up the biggest potential Connect drop, which is that Valve drops Steam frame right in the middle of the whole thing.
Yeah, I sent multiple emails to Valve, and if you're at Valve and watching this, I apologize for bothering your people with my emails trying to say that I'm ready to travel. Like we've said here, right, it would be an amazing time. I've actually told this story multiple times about them dropping that in 2019 on the Meta event. They could announce their hardware whenever. Next week doesn't have to be the week that they actually.
I think it's more likely this week than ever. My headset is dying. You can probably see my avatar glitching around. I've got seconds left. Thank you so much, folks. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks. We'll see you in the future. My headset is very much so dead.
I like watching your performance slowly peter out. You're just like, you are literally dying. It's giving out on you.
Yep.
Here, one more high five, David. No, before you go.
No, I can't. My hand tracking's gone. My head tracking's gone. If you can hear me, that's a miracle at this point, to be honest.
Bye.
Yeah, okay. My display is gone now. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the future.